So we've done research for many. Is someone pulled the fire alarm, or was that? Who could have done that? The only thing you can do against evidence and facts is trigger fire alarms. Those who disbelieve will seek to silence the truth with their tongues, but Allah will perfect His truth even if the disbelievers detest it. Takbir! Takbir! Takbir!
On day one, we had crossed the lands of liberalism and explored the caves of conservatism. On day two, we had climbed the mountains of Marxism. And day three, we walked past the forests of feminism. Day four, we had swam through the coral reefs of critical race theory. And now we are here today, on day five, the grand finale, or my nickname for it, the end game. And I'll leave Ustad to explain what the topic is, inshaAllah. So, I just want to go through a few formalities. I want to firstly say thank you, Jazakallah khair, to Bridging Gaps for partnering with us in this endeavor, especially Brother Al-Andalusi. Jazakallah khair for your support, advice, and help throughout this conference. I want to thank the scholars and community leaders who have come out, namely Mufti Shujat, Sheikh Jangir, Imam Yahya, Brothers in Yura, and Sheikh Taha. Jazakallah khair for coming out and spending your time with us today. I also want to give a special shout out to SFU MSA. Inshallah, they had an event planned and they canceled it just to come today. So Jazakallah khair for your efforts and your sacrifice. And I would now like to invite up Brother Abdullah Khawaja for the Quran recitation.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I will be reading a few ayats from Surah Al-Isra, inshaAllah ta'ala. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وقل رب أدخلني مدخل صدق وأخرجني مخرج صدق واجعل لي من لدنك سلطانا نصيرا وقل جاء الحق وزهق الباطل وقل جاء الحق وزهق الباطل إن الباطل كان زهوقا وننزل من القرآن ما هو شفاء ورحمة للمؤمنين ولا يزيد الظالمين إلا خسارا وإذا وإذا مسه الشر كان يئوسا قل كل يعمل على شاكلته فربكم أعلم بمن هو أهدى سبيلا. Starting from verse 80 of Surah Al-Isra, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and say, my Lord, grant me an honorable entrance and an honorable exit, and give me a supporting authority from yourself. And declare that the truth has come and the falsehood has vanished. That the truth has come and the falsehood has vanished. Indeed, falsehood is bound to vanish. And we send down the Quran as a healing and a mercy for the believers. but it only increases the wrongdoers in loss. When we grant people our favors and they turn away, acting arrogantly, but when touched with evil, they lose all hope. Say, O Prophet, everyone acts in their own way, but your Lord knows best whose way is rightly guided. Jazakumullah khair.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Abdullah, for the beautiful Quran recitation. Now, to introduce our speaker is Ustad Abdullah Al-Andalusi. He is an international speaker, thinker, and intellectual activist. He is an instructor at the Quran Institute and co-founder of the Muslim Debate Initiative. He has written extensive articles on secularism, liberalism, and various other Western ideologies and philosophies. He engages in debates and appearances and appears on BBC, ITV, and Al Jazeera, and many other channels. And I would now like to, without further ado, introduce Ustad to the stage.
Kareem Muhammad wa ali tayyibin wa sahbi salihin. I greet you with Islamic greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'd like to apologize for my tie. It was originally grey, but after looking at all these left-wing ideologies, it just turned red. So, do apologize for that. Right. Sit up. Well, what a week it's been. Well, then again, what a 7 months it's been, I suppose, for some people. It's great to be back in UBC since last year. And of course, I've been back for the last couple of days as well, talking about some interesting issues. As I said, in about 3 weeks' time, I'll actually be back, conversely, for Islam Awareness Week to talk about Islam. But this week was felt as necessary to talk about non-Islamic ideologies, Western ideologies, ethical and political, which conflict with Islam. And a colleague of mine quite aptly named it Kufr Awareness Week. So this is basically what we've been discussing. Now, I always like to kind of start off my sessions with a bit of a brain teaser. So here's the brain teaser. I'll see if I can. What is the point of a public debate if both speakers or panels usually don't change their mind? Can anyone give an answer? Or would you say that's true? What is the point of public debate if the people involved in the debate will probably not change their minds? Does anyone have an answer for that? On this side, sister there. Sister says it's awareness, so you hear both sides. Okay. Anyone on this side? Brother, with the jacket.
To educate people who will be watching, but like they will be able to see both sides, and people will be able to form their own judgment based on the information they get from both sides.
They'll be able to see both sides and be able to make a good judgment. Does anyone have any additional definitions or different answers for to that? Or you're pretty much agreed with that? Sister on the side there.
Like being able to understand someone's thought process, once they explain it, you're actually able to kind of like analyze where they're coming from.
Being able to to understand someone's thought process, because once they explain it, you'll be able to see where they're coming from. Okay. Yes. See, the thing is this: humans are funny creatures. We have many triggers in ourselves. Probably a lot of these are irrational triggers, like phobias or things when we grew up, and tastes and things, which do not necessarily are based on rationality per se, on correct argument thinking. Basically, we have triggers that are based on assumptions. We have ideas, we have misconceptions, which are based on assumptions. So when we interpret the world with these assumptions, and the assumptions didn't derive from what we're seeing, we will bring something into the interpretation which the observation isn't telling us, and it skews our understanding of what we're looking at. But you see, the thing is, when you're debating someone one-on-one and there's no one around, they could just argue with you, and if they don't find that you've touched upon their triggers, or if you haven't really you haven't psychoanalyzed them and kind of talked them out of kind of subconscious biases or tastes they have, then they'll simply consider you haven't convinced them because you haven't dealt with the motivations they have for adopting a position. And those motivations, you might call them what you call emotional motivations, which all humans generally do and have if they're being irrational. However, in a public debate, you just can't tell the people that them to share your assumptions, them to share your emotions. So you have to find a way to rationalize it, i.e., give a reason that everyone can agree with, or you simply have to concede that you're not, that you just want to disagree and that's it. Now, public debate is where you actually are in front of a jury, which would be you guys in this situation, where you get to be judge, jury, hopefully not executioner, to the discussions going both ways in a debate and discussion. Now, I'm aware that this is a lecture, and this obviously isn't a debate. As you know, I co-founded the Muslim Debate Initiative. I actually prefer debates, but people want me to do long-form discussions as opposed to just, start public statements against my opponent and have a back and forth. So I tend to do more lectures because I get invited to do more lectures, but I'd happily just do only debates and just write books on the side to be the long-form discussion of my content. So in lieu of this being a public debate or discussion with different sides, I always say in my lectures, and I said it since last year, people remember I said it last year, I want you to approach this discussion critically. In essence, I want you to prove everything I say wrong. I want you to doubt everything I say. I want you to criticize everything I say. I want you to demand of me I prove every single syllable that comes out of my mouth. Why? Because don't believe me just because I have a British accent. British accents, yes, they sound good, but British people don't always know what they're talking about. Boris Johnson is a case in point. So, I want you to be critical, because I would have demanded that for all sides and all positions and so on and so forth. And I think that if Muslims especially were critical of the information that they were seeing, we wouldn't encounter the many problems we do in the Muslim world today. So I want to lead by example. Okay. Disclaimer, this lecture is not about condemning individuals, demanding you cut people off from their friends or do bara or so on and so forth, or kick people out of various jamaats or what have you, or do takfir, or deny the prevalence of jahiliyyah amongst the Muslims, asabiyya, kibr and so on, which you might use Western terms to describe, like racism and so on and so forth. No one's denying that. In fact, I'm one of the biggest vocalist individuals speaking out against the jahiliyyah amongst the Muslim world all the time. I sound like a broken record player, basically. And my simple argument is, if you're going to talk about jahiliyyah, then talk about it comprehensively. In essence, for example, if you're going to talk about racism, or we'd say asabi and kibr to be more specific, and this is what I've been arguing, that don't use Western terms because you subject yourself to Western definitions, which are not necessarily Islamic definitions. Right? Then I would simply say that in the Muslim world, everyone's racist against everybody else, right? And it's deeply prevalent, and we're going to have some interesting case studies of that to show how if you focus only on one kind, you'll miss all the other kinds, but then you miss something more important. What is causing all this? If everyone shares the same symptoms, you can't only focus on one particular demographic of people manifesting those symptoms. You should look for the root cause, the disease that would affecting everybody that has exactly the same symptoms, right? Not just focus on one side or the other side, and there's multiple sides anyway. So, this lecture will discuss facts concerning the causes behind the problems affecting Muslims. As I said, challenge is welcome. This week, we critically engaged liberalism and conservatism. Now, for some individuals who follow left-wing ideologies, which means ideologies which are generally on the spectrum of socialism, Marxism, and neo-Marxism, they had to explain why I would ever criticize socialism, Marxism, because as you all know, Marxism, socialism must be the truth and justice. So the only reason anybody would ever criticize those ideologies is not because they follow a deen or a religion that was revealed by the creator of the universe that understands human beings better than Karl Marx. No, it's because I'm a conservative and I'm or liberal or something, or both in some weird shape or form, or a hidden fascist or whatever, right? I have to be right-wing because that's the only way the left-wing understands any criticism, is that this is done by the right-wing. The right-wing on a spectrum which was the Western spectrum of measuring political ideologies and so on, their own spectrum. The point of this whole week is to show Islam is beyond that spectrum. It transcends it. And so, although I suppose, logically speaking, I would start off with refuting liberalism and conservatism anyway, because they were the first Western ideologies, political ideologies that arose, you could say, more or less. I decided that it would be the first ones, and we should record that first and publicize it first, because I've actually been refuting liberalism and conservatism much longer than I've ever done debating and refuting Marxism. I just thought Marxism was dead, pretty much after. I thought the Cold War kind of demonstrated that it doesn't work, and even Vietnam is not really fully Marxist anymore, or communist. Lenin saw that it was unworkable, and they had to adopt some kind of hybrid economic systems, because the economic systems of Marxism didn't meet the predictions that Karl Marx expected. So we've been mostly focusing on refuting liberalism, because, or its economic system, as you might know it, capitalism, and how that fundamentally disagrees with Islam, and how Muslims need to liberate ourselves from capitalism and liberalism, and also not adopt conservatism, which you might think, I don't understand, aren't we meant to be conservatives? No, we're not. Right? If the Prophet Muhammad was a conservative, he would have preserved the cultures and traditions, he would have conserved the cultures and traditions of the Quraysh, right? Not actually changed them, in many cases very radically so. That's not a conservative. Conservatives don't do that. Yeah? Conservatives only care about stability and, the Muslim version of it, avoiding fitna. Right? A fitna being any disruption or breach of the silence they would like to see pervasive in society. Silence and immobility in society. Unfortunately, that's a problem that many Muslims have. And do you know what? In some cases, and this is why today it's going to be very cathartic to me, because I'm going to have it out with you guys. The reason why you get left-wing Muslims, the reason why you get Muslims who open up books by Karl Marx or Gramsci or Kimberly Crenshaw or whomever, is because you don't give them an Islamic vision for the world. Okay? It's more than just, well, the whole world should be praying to Allah and 5 times a day. Okay, yes, that's true, but Islam's a bit more than that. It gives you actual practical guidance. It gives you definitions of justice. It tells you how to achieve. It gives you a political system. It gives you an economic system that's not capitalism, and it's definitely not communism or Marxism or socialism. And if you don't know this, if you don't understand this, and if you don't want to talk about political subjects, quote unquote, guess what? There's a whole bunch of non-Muslims and non-Islamic books out there waiting for your children's and your siblings' minds. Right? And they'll see it. And if you think that as I said, I try to have a really realistic understanding of people's mentality. If you read any book, whether it's by a liberal philosopher, let's say John Rawls, for example, or a conservative philosopher, let's say Michael Oakeshott, or Karl Marx's books themselves, or the neo-Marxist works like Adorno or Horkheimer, or any others afterwards, Derek Bell from Critical Race Theory, every book you read is convincing, and it seems to explain everything, even though they all mutually contradict each other, right? But they all sound convincing if you don't know any better. Okay? In some ways, it's like, a conspiracy theory. Conspiracy theories, why are they popular? It's because they seem to explain everything, right? Obama and Hillary Clinton, they control some satanic cult that kidnaps children and sacrifices them to the devil underneath a pizza shop or something like that. Yeah, but but aren't there child disappearances? Aren't there child disappearances in America? You see, explains it, right? Well, in a way, that's what happens. Conspiracy theories are effective because they're virtually undisputable. You can't falsify them because they're not really based on evidence, right? And if something's not based on evidence, it can't be refuted by evidence that doesn't exist. I suppose, to use Richard Dawkins' crass example of the orbiting teapot, if someone says there's a teapot orbiting the sun, and you say, well, where's your evidence? Well, there has to be, right? And then you're like, no, there isn't. Well, okay, disprove it. Well, I can't disprove it, but you need to give me evidence in the first place. So, that has been, so I don't judge too harshly young Muslims that adopt these ideologies, because I think the problem is is conservative Muslims who want to keep everyone not talking about politics because fitna, giving our youth a vision of the future, of a re-established Islamic caliphate system, a united Islamic civilization. A caliphate system was what was the ijma of all the scholars for 1400 years said it was absolutely obligatory for Muslims to unite under one imam who would defend our borders, who would maintain the laws and establish justice for also non-Muslims too. Okay? We don't have that. And we're told, yeah, but let's not get involved in politics or what have you, or just wait for the Mahdi, he'll sort everything out, because as you know, the purpose of life of human beings was to be created to wait for one guy in the future to do everything for them, right? That was the purpose of human beings, right? So, that Allah made us for, right? So, this is why these youngsters will succumb to these ideologies. So I'm not here to support you conservative Muslims out there to try to make everything go away and return it back to the serene but banal peace that you wanted. No, I'm here to shake things up and actually get the Quran and Sunnah not just recited but read and implemented. Right? The Quran is very beautiful, but it was meant for implementation more than it was for just recitation. So Monday I refuted liberalism and conservatism. I also refuted capitalism, at least its core creed, how its understanding of the human economic problem is false, and how Islam has the superior understanding and a rational understanding. As I said, I've mostly debated liberals in my life, and a few conservatives as well, even one neoconservative once. So those are the main bread and butter of my opponents. But as for Marxists, they generally don't want to debate Muslims because they see that you're useful pawns in their war, in their culture war, and they would prefer to recruit you Muslims, right? Because you make great cannon fodder. I mean activists that will work for them, against the evil capitalist bourgeois. Okay. On Tuesday, I discussed Marxism. I refuted Marxism. I showed how Karl Marx's ideas. Historically his predictions failed about what he thought would be the next evolution of human society. He thought that the most advanced capitalist states would have a revolution and bring about a socialist government, and then that would eventually lead to communism. That didn't work out. And I showed how Marxism contradicts Islam itself, and there's no way around that. There's no mental gymnastics, and some Muslim Marxists attempt mental gymnastics, but they never be able to answer me when I engaged them. I engaged them on Twitter just to see what they'd say, because I was like, oh, Marxists, Muslim Marxists, I thought they died off in the 60s and 70s, but apparently they did not. And they couldn't answer my objections, right? And yet they had the temerity to tell me that I didn't know what I was talking about concerning Marxism. Right? I mean, I've only been studying it for about 20 years, but hey, maybe these 18-year-olds can tell me something about Marxism I don't know. Well, actually, to be fair, sometimes people can surprise you, and sometimes I might have just missed one odd notebook of his from 1844, perhaps, that he published posthumously, and maybe, who knows? But I'm simply saying that. Let's just say I wasn't surprised by anything they said, but they were certainly surprised by what I said. Anyway, neo-Marxism is just basically Marxists that realized that Karl Marx didn't know what he was talking about for a lot of things, and they didn't apostate from Marxism. They just tweaked it. And these are the guys who are heavily influential in Western society today amongst the youth. You know them as woke, right? And we'll discuss what they mean. The two applications of neo-Marxism that I discussed on Wednesday, one was critical gender studies, or third or fourth wave feminism, which was dominated by woke arguments. And of course, yesterday we looked at the neo-Marxist application into race, otherwise known as critical race theory. So let's get involved. Now, just so you know, in case you didn't realize where the conclusion of this whole week was going, the left wing and right wing are just two spectrums that were, well, there's one spectrum that was invented by the French Revolution haphazardly, because basically those on the left wing, literally of the National Assembly of the French Revolution, wanted to abolish the monarchy, and the more crazy of the left wing wanted to abolish property kind of privileges for the landed elite and so on and so forth. And those on the right wanted to keep the monarchy, but have some type of constitutional safeguards to some degree. But those on the far right wanted to actually go back to absolute dictatorship by the monarchy, because weren't those the days? That's where it comes from, and so people attributed that those who want to keep things the way they are, or slightly go back a bit, are right-wing, and those who want to make changes are left-wing, usually changes in the direction of individualism and increasing equality. Here's the Western schools of thought, which I've made a nice little diagram, now correctly positioned left to right. You have the Enlightenment idea, the idea that man, and I'm using this in the Old English sense, meaning human, because that's what it meant. It didn't mean male initially. Man, as in human, humans, the belief that the individual human owns their own body. That's the Enlightenment idea. That is the aqidah of every Western political and ethical social school, is the individual human is the sovereign, ultimate sovereign of themselves. There is nothing higher than that person. Right, of political significance. That means they own their own body, good and bad is determined by their consent, and every school of thought, every madhab, you could say, of the West, whether it's liberalism, conservatism, socialism, Marxism is a type of socialism, social democracy, neo-Marxism, even fascism, social liberalism, libertarianism, they all share this exact same aqidah. So where does Islam fit in this? Nowhere. Islam is not left or right. Islam is wasat. All right? It's balance. And you know what's interesting? I chose this image deliberately because it doesn't look like there are equal sized rocks on either side, right? It's not about a simple balance between two exactly identical things, but rather overall balance with different shapes and different weights given to different things, different objects, but there's an overall balance in the two. So those who are given more power are also given more or have more responsibility in the exertion of that power. And I've discussed that. I've quoted verses of the Quran to show how Allah himself explains how he gives to some more than others so that they may be of service to other people. You have to have advantages of others because that advantage can be used in service to those. That's the military, they are trained in weapons. They know how to fight better than you can. They have access to weapons that you don't. Why? Because it's hoped that they will get in between you and an enemy bullet. Right? You know, what if the Americans invade again? You know, you need your soldiers to defend you guys. So, Islam is not left or right at all whatsoever. And you must resist attempts by any Muslims to label each other left or right if they indeed are Muslim. But if they have succumbed to Western ideologies, then of course they fall into left and right. But then that means they fall out of the Islamic worldview. Now I want to make a very key point here, which is we should make excuses for Muslims today who are ignorant about what Islam says. So a Muslim can have Kufr ideas, but because they themselves, maybe they don't fully see it, they don't understand that's the case, they're not to be called a kafir until the hujjah, full evidence is established upon them. And then when they truly understand that and they persist, well then they have chosen to remain outside of Islam. Okay? But until that point has happened, and I don't think it's happened by a long shot, and the individuals who've been spending the last couple of years reading book after book every month from left-wing ideologies won't be convinced by a few lectures that I do, because they've been so entrenched in it. You have to have personal halakas one-to-one with them to go through bit by bit to de-radicalize them, so to speak, to de-brainwash them of these ideas. So these lectures are designed really to inoculate you guys, like a little injection, give you a little inoculation, so that when you encounter these ideas, you can spot them and you can deal with them. Okay, so this is what I did this week in a nutshell. So let's talk about case studies. For many years, I've studied left-wing ideologies simply as theories. Ideas. Now, I see them manifested in media by activists, by lobbies, and so on and so forth. I see people talk about these things. Okay, it's out in the public. But what I actually lacked, was an understanding of how it affects Muslims, how Muslims are affected by this, and what they look like and say in Muslim environments. Now, in masjids, you don't get many left-wing individuals coming to masjids talking about left-wing ideologies, unless they create their own masjids, what have you. And there's a few ones like in Sweden or what have you, which is the imam is a woman, and they marry same-sex partners and things like this. Okay, that's a left-wing masjid. But in most masajid, they don't turn up, right? And in most madrasas, they don't turn up, or they don't announce their beliefs. But there is one platform where they could announce their beliefs, because there's no imam supervising them that would kick them out of the masjid. And this is the university, where all Muslims will mix, right? And Muslims from all kind of opinions will mix, and sometimes all hell can break loose because of different conflicting ideologies. And the problem is that the left-wing Muslims don't think that what they're calling to is not Islam, right? Because they wouldn't say that, they wouldn't insist on still being Muslims if that was the case. They have retrofitted, or they do eisegesis, they fit these ideologies and they claim that's what Islam says. And it works very simple like this. I said it before. The Quran says, stand for justice. And they say, okay, thank you Quran, stand for justice. Okay, put you down. Karl Marx, justice means, that's how it works. Yeah, so they say stand for justice, great, work for justice, fight for justice, great, thank you Quran, put you down. Now let's get that definition of that word from some Western books. Yeah, wait a second, the Muslim would say, the Muslim who is ideologically upon the deen and holistic, wants to use the deen for guidance, says, what does the Quran say about the definition of justice? What does it look like? What does the Sunnah say is the definition of justice? That's the difference between the two, right? If you want a simple way of putting it. Okay, as you may have heard, there was a massive, great stonking report, 350 pages, that was dropped into everybody's laps. This week, on I believe Tuesday, it was the 1st of February. The 31st, it was 31st, wasn't it? That's Tuesday the 31st, I believe, yes? Yes, it was the 31st of January. So the report was about events that happened at this university, although SFU are kind of tangentially involved. They're in the back, so you guys are represented as well. And I would like to thank the brothers at Simon Fraser University and the sisters at Simon Fraser University for kindly cancelling the event and coming here to be here today with us to participate in the conversation. Unless the event was cancelled due to other reasons, you say, let's just pretend that we cancelled it for Abdullah. Yeah, okay, yeah. Hey Abdullah, yeah, we're here. It's for you. Yeah. Okay. So in essence, this report was very useful because it was an amazing case study into what happens when you get Muslims that have different ideologies, and what do they do, how do they act, and how do we prevent problems arising again, which is the most important question. How do MSAs across Canada, across the world, prevent the same reoccurrences and learn some lessons? So why was there a necessity for the MSA UBC report? They had a meeting on the 29th of June with members of a group called the BMC, or Black Muslim Collective, highlighting their problems they had with the organization itself and its ideologies. They raised the issue of neo-Marxism, critical race theory, which comes from it, of it demanding mandatory training attached to certain training providers that have very dubious ideologies and activism they tout, creating a toxic identity politics culture that incited asabiya between men and women and between people of races, different ethnicities amongst Muslims on the campus, where previously it wasn't, well, certainly not to that level anyway. So, and of course, advocacy for LGBTQ. I'll make a disclaimer here, as obviously many non-Muslims looking might misunderstand and misinterpret. As Muslims, we don't have to agree or say that same-sex relationships or physical intimacy is morally valid or morally good for us to tolerate and to have mutual tolerance. We don't have to agree. Okay, we don't have to agree. We wouldn't say that anyone should deserve to be discriminated at work or to be attacked on the street or face any kind of of attack or persecution or what have you, simply because of what they do in the privacy of their own home. We don't argue that people should be harassed or targeted or treated any differently in professional environments because of what they do in the privacy of their own home. That's very clear. However, please do not expect us to demonstrate tolerance by your definition, where you might want us to say, but you have to agree that it is morally valid or a morally valid life choice to engage in same-sex relationships outside of marriage or inside a marriage or what have you. So when advocacy for LGBT is mentioned, it is mentioned in the line of the validity of same-sex relationships, which Muslims can't accept. But some Muslims following left-wing ideologies will actually justify and even distort the Quran to justify, as I disturbingly encountered in the investigation along with fellow researchers. So the MSA approached the BMC and said that there's issues that they refused to take heed, and so they were informed that they would be disassociated from. Now, the decision was already made before the meeting, but you can see the minutes of the meeting there. So the MSA publicly announces on the 29th of June that it terminates its relationship with the BMC, and it announced in UBC Muslims Discord, and it simply mentioned that it had only concerns with organization and leadership, and it gave no specifics. The next day, the BMC responded with a publication on its Instagram by accusing the MSA of having rampant anti-black racism, which is a very specific accusation. So simply then, a simple quiet disassociation wasn't going to result in a quiet response or a muted response, but an outright actual public accusation against them. So then, of course, as any MSA would, if you were an MSA and the MSA was accused of anti-black racism, which without no evidence given at the very least anyway, obviously you have to respond, of course. So on the 3rd of July, so just 2 days later, the MSA releases a statement on Facebook about the BMC cutoff, responding to those allegations and going into depth and detail about why the MSA had to disassociate from the BMC publicly because of the concerns they had with their leadership and their organization and values and so on and so forth. A few weeks later, the BMC issues a statement of its own, again denying all this and simply saying it is slander, it is all lies, and of course doubling down on saying that the MSA are racist, but also adding that they're sexist too, right, for extra measure. So it was clear then that no one is really going to, whoever supports the BMC are never going to believe what the MSA says, regardless of the letters they said, regardless of how emphatic they say it. And of course, it was also argued that the MSA president is a man, and he is white passing kind of, or white adjacent. So because of that, he has lower epistemological value, i.e. he can't be believed, versus people who have attributes associated, according to neo-Marxist theory, with oppressed minorities who should be believed over those who have attributes associated with the oppressor group, oppressor class. It's called standpoint epistemology. We'll get to that. So there was nothing that the MSA could say or do to convince anybody. Right? And they've been slandered now, and it's only gotten worse because a whole list of arguments were made. And what could they do if the reply to anything they say would be, you're basically just, you are dominated by male patriarchy, you're sexist, racist, and anything you say is just trying to reinforce your position of privilege and power. What could you say to that? Well, you can't, because there's nothing that you could say would ever be believed. But there is something that can be believed, though, and that is documented evidence produced copiously for every single syllable and claim made by the MSA, if it is unmerited, of course. So the MSA reached out to the Muslim Debate Initiative. We do research. We've done research for many years. We're quite thorough. We do research for debates, debating non-Muslim academics, and so we've done research for many. Is someone pulled the fire alarm, or was that? Who could have done that? So that's That's quite low. Whoever did that. Maybe they're investigating of the terminology. There's no actual fire.
There's no fire.
There never is. All right, we'll just wait. Sorry? Shall I still continue, yeah? All right, khair, inshaAllah. All right, everyone. Yeah?
Just tell them to stay settled. We're going to check it out, 4 or 5 of us.
Okay. Yeah. Relax, everybody. The 4 or 5 individuals at MSA will check it out and no doubt fight the imaginary fire very vigorously. Now, I'd like to remind everybody that since we have no immediate evidence, we should not speculate as to who or what motivation might be behind the person that triggered it. So we'll simply say Allahu Alam until further evidence presents itself. Okay, but it's quite strange because this never happened before ever, and all the time I've ever been in UBC, and seems to be quite a rarity. So just don't worry, just relax, and they'll find out. You'll find out if it's true or not by the brothers coming back, or you'll just see smoke coming in through the doors. Either way. Anyway, okay. I'll just continue with the annoying noise. So do forgive me. All right. So, in order to respond to people that might be irrational and resort to irrational responses, we had to use evidence and facts, because evidence and facts you can't dispute against them. The only thing you can do against evidence and facts is trigger fire alarms.
All right, everybody. There's no evidence of a fire. Okay. Does someone go around and get these things, or how does it work?
I don't know. Firefighters, the official protocol is that you have to leave. It's like legally required because the fire department, I don't know who is going to come and check, so we're not allowed to stay here. So what I'm thinking is we should take everybody into one particular spot on the field.
Okay.
Together, because everyone else is going to go away because everyone else in the whole building, the Starbucks, the workers, the janitors, they're all leaving except for us.
All right. Okay, I've been informed that it might be a legal requirement for you to leave the building. So, brother, do you have a particular spot or a rendezvous spot we should gather around? All right, everyone, no need to leave. They're about to shut it down. Everybody, come back. Come back.
Just another update. I know some students are concerned that why is this happening or whatnot. I just want to reaffirm that we are in direct contact with the fire department as we speak. They say there's no reason to worry, there's no danger, there's no nothing. They're just trying to find the fire panel and turn off the alarms. Okay, so do not worry. There's no anything like that. There's no evident danger or anything like this. So just to reaffirm everybody. Okay. Okay. Alhamdulillah, you guys can all sit down. We'll resume in about just 30 seconds.
It reminds me of a verse in the Quran where it says, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, paraphrase, that those who disbelieve will seek to silence the truth with their tongues, but Allah will perfect His truth even if the disbelievers detest it. Takbir! 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 And they can't silence YouTube when this comes out anyway, so hopefully. Interesting, we didn't announce it just yet because we were trying to reduce controversies, but the campus security before this week began contacted the MSA and said that some people had complained about my presence at the university because it made them feel unsafe. So, I mean, I haven't been hunting any students going around university, at least for a few years anyway. But you know what? I'm going to make this a learning situation because, as we will learn, but according to left-wing ideologies such as neo-Marxism, they believe that there's no real such thing as truth as you might understand it. There's really just power concepts. And so there's no point trying to debate with the right wing or whatever because they are not based upon truth, and our truth is the idea that it's objective is a capitalist illusion. So instead, they'll say that the only thing you can engage injustice with is with counterpower, okay? And so in many universities and places, halls and places where, let's say you get right-wing speakers are coming to those places, you see that the kind of left-wing students have on those other universities used tactics against their rivals, which include setting off fire alarms as well. Yeah, as well as other things such as, kind of getting as many of their own people to sit down to take up space, and then when the lecture begins, they'll get up and they just leave. Those kind of tactics. So, because for them, there's no point trying to engage intellectually, because truth, there's no such thing as real objective truth. Truth is socialized. It's part of it is a social construct, and only has utility depending on which group you are. So there's no point trying to engage or intellect or debate people. You have to disrupt, you have to fight with counterpower. That's the only way to win. So I'm not saying that so whoever did this was someone who follows left-wing ideologies. I'm simply saying that it's a tactic that left-wing followers and adherents have used quite frequently elsewhere. As to who did it, Allahu Alam, it's never good to speculate. Anyway, but I'll leave you guys to maybe investigate, who knows, right? And of course, if someone says, oh, Abdullah did takfir on some left-wing Muslims, well, how so? Oh, because he used this verse of the Quran that talked about the disbelievers disliking the truth. And say, oh, so you know who did it and they were Muslim? Or they said they were Muslim? Oh, no, I wasn't. Okay, so you can play the game if you like. But if anyone ever says I was doing takfir, then you know that they know who did it, right? All right, it could have been a non-Muslim. How do you know, right? So, okay, khair, inshallah, we'll start again without beeping noises in between. So, the Muslim Debate Initiative is a debate organization in the UK. We were set up to do debates. And to set up a Muslim platform which is kind of initiated by Muslims, but debating non-Islamic ideas and ideologies. And we wanted to show, because there was a right-wing kind of perception that Muslims wanted to silence debate, and Muslims and Islam didn't like to be criticized. That was what they were saying, things like that. And so we said, no, we're not. All right, bring it. Like, we'll set up the debates, and you bring your champions. And we mostly debated right-wingers, and then of course soon we debated center-left or liberals and so on and so forth, and atheists and Christians and so on and so forth. So that was in essence what we were set up for. We engaged in research. We've had years and years of being able to obviously research large quantities of facts and things, usually political events, because we usually get called on to speak on news platforms and discuss and do Muslim advocacy. So to advocate from the Muslim perspective on a number of issues, usually when Muslims are in the news again and they want to demonize Islam or Muslims. So we would get called up to basically engage them on those platforms. So we were contacted, and the director of Muslim Debate Initiative, who is Zara Faris, agreed to do an investigation, but she had certain conditions to set up the MSA, which is that the MSA must give unstinting access to all evidence they have. In law, it's called discovery, where you look at all the evidences that someone has. They have to kind of empty their hard drives onto you for everyone to see what was in there and then to look through. And that the MSA must accept the conclusions of the report, even if it's against themselves. And if they are indeed found to have been wanting in anti-racist policies or anti-sexist policies, which are defined from the Islamic criteria, so anti-kibr, anti-asabiyya, basically, then they are to apologize for it, and they are to basically make remedial activities and actions. Of course, if that's not the case, then obviously it would have to report what was actually happened and to see, so that everyone can see what was going on. The point was, we would make it as transparent as possible. So all evidences have been dumped onto the report, which you can see by links and screenshots and so on and so forth. Why? Because we were operating on the assumption that we would not be believed at all whatsoever even if we make quotations. So we have to be with screenshots with it. It has to be screenshot because no one can deny it. And when only one line of a comment is quoted, the screenshot is of the whole comment, right? So you can read it in context for yourself. In essence, you don't even need our commentary on it. You can simply just take all the evidence for yourself and do your own investigation and produce your own conclusions, basically, right? You don't even need our commentary on it. So, but in essence, to save time, if you'd like, we've put commentary, but the commentary was checked against the evidence very carefully. We did reach out. We asked the MSA to contact the BMC, and we asked them to provide all evidence of claims of sexism and racism that they've encountered. We didn't even specify that it can't be, as far as what I can relate, it can't be testimonial, but at least just give us some evidence, any evidence they have, all evidences they have. We'll take it all into consideration, and they didn't respond, which is unfortunate because we enjoy to see at least both sides of the argument, although all the discussions and arguments were there in black and white on these forum messages and so on and so forth. We discovered that the cause of the student dispute was more than just a personality clash between MSA members. I mean, we all know MSA members like to clash with each other all the time. Somehow they think that because you're part of an MSA, you must have real political power and you can control the fate of nations or something. But really, you just kind of control maybe some Juma topics and booking a room now and again for free as opposed to renting it out, which anyone can do, right? Any external organization can rent out a room by paying money. So that was it, basically. That's the extent of the massive powers and privileges that the MSAs have. So we realized, we discovered it wasn't just a personality clash, and it was rather a clash of political ideologies masquerading as claims of sexism and racism, right? Because no one can say, let's say if you're a left-winger, if you're a Marxist, let's say Marxist Muslim, you can't say, we should everyone condemn this MSA, they're not Marxist. Well, no one's going to say, okay, well, actually, we'll condemn you. Why? Because you're Marxist, right? They won't, doesn't work so well. But if you say the MSA is racist and sexist, well, then that works, of course. Yeah, then that works. I fear for a time, in a few decades, where it will be sufficient to condemn an MSA by calling them anti-LGBT. And that would work on Muslims. I fear for that time. Who knows, that could come if you don't do anything about it. Okay, so it was felt that the people need to know the actual reasons for the dispute, but more than that, more than just the facts, we had to explain the motivations, but we can't open up people's heads to see what motivates them, unless they reveal it by the scholars they cite, the non-Muslim scholars they cite themselves, the type of rhetoric they use, the phraseology they use. If you can notice that in antecedent Western academic scholars, you can trace with a good degree of probability where they are motivated from. And it's not just ambiguous, you'll see for yourselves anyway. But the reason why I wanted to do that is not simply to say, you guys get this from this person, or you get your ideas from this person. It was to show you that no matter really whatever the MSA did, short of compromising Islam, you could never have appeased their demands, ever. You would never be able to appease their demands, because their demands are beyond simply just they're purporting to be creating an anti-sexist or anti-racist space. It's a bit more than that. Those things are levers to put other things into the MSA. And what we discovered was some individuals who are supporters of the BMC even expressed that was their intention in the first place. They joined the MSA to make changes within it, and they implied, let's just call it heterodox opinions on like hijab and things like that. They wanted to make those changes without consulting the MSA, without even having a debate about it. They just felt, we're going to go in and we're going to implement these other ideas that we have, liberal ideas or Marxist ideas or so on and so forth. And so that's what we uncovered in the investigation. And lastly, Muslims need case studies of left-wing students, what they say, so that you can spot them and at least know how to engage them correctly. Okay? And that's important. Do you know why? I say this later on, though, but I'll say it in advance. Many Muslim men, when a sister comes up to them and the sister demands her Islamic rights, many of these guys are ignorant, and they just think, woman asking rights must be feminism. And they say, you're a feminist, you're a feminist. No, guys, why are you shooting yourself in the foot? okay? That's not the case. A feminist is not a woman who demands her rights. A feminist could be a man demanding rights for women, but a feminist is a person who demands a particular kind of right defined by the Western interpretation of identicality, otherwise they call it equality, all right? Like equal gender roles and things like this. That's what makes a feminist. A Muslim sister saying, for example, Muslim women should be allowed to go into the masjid because the Prophet Muhammad said, do not prevent believing women from going to the masjid. Yeah, that's not a feminist, that's a Muslim asking for her rights. Women went up to the Prophet Muhammad and asked for their rights, and they weren't called feminists, okay? So if you know what a real left-winger looks like and says, you can tell the difference, okay? But until then, please do not just assume things, because you know what happens to the Muslim sister who is calling for Islamic rights, and even Islamic rights are being denied to her, then she's going to start thinking, maybe you guys just do hate women like they've been hearing the left-wingers tell them, right? And then you radicalize them onto the other side of things. Yeah. Likewise, and I said it earlier on in the week by putting a big photo up without any context and letting people freak out about it. Likewise, and it's not I don't think it's controversial to say or radical to say, despite the fact that he's now Muslim, Andrew Tate isn't a sheikh or an alim, yeah? Unless he's telling you something practical like how to change tires on the many sports cars he has, he can't teach you anything about good and bad, should and shouldn't, fard and haram, yeah? There's only one that can, it's the Quran and Sunnah, and the example of the real men from the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, who showed Muslim men how to be real men. That you'll get guaranteed. I'm not insulting Andrew Tate because now he's a Muslim, but even now he's a Muslim, he's a new Muslim. What else? He can't teach you anything anyway, because he's just busy learning his salah. Yeah? So please, please, please don't think that the way to combat feminism is to fight fire is more fire, because ultimately you'll all end up in the fire, right? Both figuratively and literally, okay? And you know what? Some left-wing Muslims first started out, with good intentions, yeah? And the good intention was they were going to refute capitalism, they refute liberalism, right? Just as I was refuting liberalism, capitalism. I know, because I remember many dua back in the day saying, oh, do you know what? There's all these non-Muslim guys that refute liberalism too. We never knew they existed. I think they're called something like neo-Marx or something. Anyway, so let's read their books, brother, because they can get some really great critiques against capitalism and liberalism. Say, yes, but critiques from a criteria, judging good and bad. If something is bad, you have to have a criteria, right? And that criteria isn't the halal and haram specified by the creator. And they fell into left-wing liberalism because they thought the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? It wasn't. Okay. So I kind of mentioned the methodology of the MSA UBC report. All claims that were likely to be disputed was backed up by documentary evidence. So we documented everything that anyone could potentially dispute. All claims were linked to evidence on footnotes. There might be one or two footnotes missing, but they're being corrected, just probably because there's 1,500 of them. But they will be corrected hopefully in the next few days. Also, just a few missing, but basically, we have evidence for everything that was used. All claims should be correctly characterized in the evidence, so it shouldn't be twisted or distorted. If you read the original comment, you'll see that it's totally in context, and it means exactly what it purports to mean. We were very frugal in the interpretations, i.e. we made no interpretations, we just tried to say, here's what they factually said. Here's what we factually said. And I think the worst it ever gets in the report is that we say, this might suggest, but that's about it. But we don't say, this does say, right? All right. All evidentiary claims the report does not preclude any reasonable alternative interpretations. We had to make sure that there wasn't a better interpretation of the text that we were looking at, right? And we try to play husn al-dhan, give the benefit of the doubt in all cases, because we don't want to use something where someone actually meant something innocent. It's not for point scoring. Also, all people mentioned in the report, except the evidence invigilator, of course, the names that went behind researching it, have their names only as initials, right? Anyone that's a private student that was involved in this, and they wish to remain private, we're not going to put them into the public realm when they're not already in the public realm. However, there was an exception made for about 5 individuals who are already in the public realm. They're very vocal and they're very active. At least 2 of them went on TEDx. I haven't even went on TEDx, all right? I'm not jelly, much. One went on Al Jazeera. Others were reported in local newspapers and in conferences with their full name in public. That classifies as a public figure. And of course, everyone believes that public speakers and figures, no matter how high their profile or how low their profile, need to be held account for their public words and deeds, okay? And that includes women. Don't be sexist. Yeah, ironically, right? Men and women in Islam are equal when it comes to the truth, when it comes to forbidding munkar and calling to ma'ruf. Someone said to me, I won't name names, brother, what if it was your sister doing this? You wouldn't like her to be corrected in such a manner. So if my sister was involved in right-wing, left-wing ideology and so on, I wish the whole community helps her back to the deen. Yeah? It's better that she faces the slight inconvenience of just being corrected by people, trying to help her, wanting her to be saved, than not being inconvenienced in this life, but being strongly inconvenienced in the next life. Yeah? So men or women, it doesn't matter. Everyone deserves help, nasiha, but also to face rebuke and criticism for their benefit. And if they don't want to change, then for the benefit of everybody who sees them in the public realm normalizing falsehoods. Okay? You know, and also we had another criteria, which is we did discover that these individuals on their social media accounts publicly, because we were not subscribed to any of them. We didn't see what was behind paywalls and firewalls and all that kind of stuff. We weren't subscribed to any of them. It was what they broadcast. Like for anyone who didn't even have a Facebook account, you could see it. They broadcast certain things of their private life. Not all of them. I'm just saying there might have been possibly 1 or 2, only instances, things to do with their private life that if everyone was going for cheap shots, they could use, right? That was not used. Their private life is irrelevant. Even if they've publicized it, it is completely irrelevant. All that was published was what was relevant to the public statements they say, their advocacy, and related to the UBC dispute. Okay? And I would also advise that nobody go after anybody in their private lives. Okay? Yes, I know maybe they published it on their social media, but just don't do it. Okay? And so only take what they say on their public statements, which they intended to be public, which they weren't ashamed to make public because they were advocating it, they were defending it, right? Where's the shame of exposing something that they actually they were proud of to say when they said it, and they didn't recant it or change it, right? So there's no issue there. The dramatis personae, the MSA president, who's a key individual because the focus was on him. The MSA itself, of the UBC, associates and supporters of the MSA, that's just one group. The BMC co-founders, it was 3 sisters, and of course associates and supporters of the BMC, any one of those who were close friends of the BMC, publicly advocated for them and were in turn approved by the BMC to a variety of degrees. In essence, they formed a clique. Just because then they weren't officially part of the BMC doesn't mean they're not part of the same group when they make posts that the BMC likes and so on and so forth. And now, many of them are now part of the BMC as it got bigger and it became an official club. Okay, let's look at the key findings then. We discovered in the report, and now I'm not going to put the evidence up here because that would take hours and hours and hours. There's a 350-page report. It's the reason why it's so long. However, you're invited to read the report to say this, but I'm just going to give you the summary findings. The first finding was that the BMC was et al., their associates, were found to have promoted and advocated and taught Marxism. Not they were teaching some ideas which we discovered were Marxist. No, they actually said this is Marxism and that Muslims should adopt this, in essence. They spoke approvingly. They announced their curriculum would be Islam and Marxism, taunts on the MSA whiteboard saying that sisters of the world rise up, something like this, for the communist cause or what have you. They made taunts and jibes. They made taunts and jibes on their public Twitter account saying that they're going to sneak in Karl Marx's books or communist books into the Musalla for Muslims to read. So they were public, they were making jokes about this and taunting, and in a way they followed through, maybe not the books though, but with the courses and the lectures rather, they followed through with that very much. Marxism contradicts Islam in a number of ways. It abolishes private property or capital, like you can't own land. In Islam, you can own land. Religion is inverted consciousness, as Marx says. Let's just say they think religion is false, but we discussed what he meant by inverted consciousness. But religion is false. We don't believe that the deen of Islam is false. Islam allows wealthy people to exist. Marxism abolishes wealthy people as a class. There's only one class, the working class. And of course, Islam redistributes some wealth per year in zakah, 2.5%. The Marxism zakah will be 100% of your wealth, or 99.9% of your wealth redistributed. So again, there is no compatibility with Islam. And I just picked those main things because not even the most zealous and deluded of Muslim Marxists can actually have any response to that. Like if you decide not to take those aspects of Marx, you're no longer Marxist anymore. So which is that? Is it Islam or Marx? So they don't tend to respond when I put those things to them. But if any of you think you can, I'm more than happy to come back for a debate. Bring your champion or champions, and let's debate it in public in front of all you guys, and we can see which one is who's speaking the truth on the matter and who's telling the lie. BMC et al. Have promoted LGBT justificatory frameworks as well as justifications. One key figure in the BMC currently published an argument against consensual same-sex intercourse being prohibited in Islam. She published an argument condemning Muslims, and she said she criticized Muslims for believing that a particular verse in the Quran, the verse about Qawm Lut, means that same-sex intercourse is haram. The typical liberal and now Marxist spin, because socialists, Marxists, and liberals all agree on this issue, that it was only the crime of Qawm Lut is they didn't ask consent from the men before they raped them. They raped them, basically. But it wasn't that they had sex with them, it was they didn't get consent from them. The Quran doesn't seem to mention consent or rape or hiraba or anything like this. So which brings the question, if the creator of the universe intended that, but he never mentioned it, instead he just said that they take men in derogation of women and leave the women behind, is the creator of the universe a bad communicator then, that he didn't make it obvious and made the wrong idea, apparently, the idea that seemed obvious, right? They try mental gymnastics, but really, ultimately, what they're teaching will lead people to apostate from Islam, as they will ask the question later on, why do I need all these mental gymnastics to make Islam compatible with modern ideologies that I follow? Yeah, and then they're pretty much because Islam must be false. Islam must be patriarchal, and it must be racist. It's Arab supremacy, that's what they say. The ex-Muslims or just non-Muslims who follow these frameworks, they say Islam is Arab supremacy. The Arab language why is it the most important thing? Oh, because of this Quran, and so on and so forth, right? So they'll make these arguments, and these Muslims will eventually fall in their coattails, follow their coattails. The MSA didn't reject anti-racism training as the BMC alleges. The BMC says that they put anti-racism training to the MSA, and the MSA rejected it. They didn't want anti-racism training. We discovered, and you can read it yourself, the MSA did not. The MSA made a counter-proposal. They even spoke to a Ghanaian sheikh, and they said that we will agree to change our constitution because these guys were demanding that the constitution be changed to make it permanent. Of mandatory training, okay, but mandatory training with of anti-racism training with no specification or criteria behind it. And they suggested certain training providers, which we'll get to in a second. The MSA simply said, can it be mentioned that it must be from an Islamic lens, Quran and Sunnah, and be taught by an accredited Islamic scholar? That's all they wanted, okay? And in essence, it seemed like the BMC just said, well, anyway, so let's have this clause that we were going to suggest, just put it straight in as we suggested. No changes, right? Then, of course, it was voted against. The BMC claimed it was overwhelmingly rejected. 8 to 5? It's not really overwhelming. That's pretty close run, actually. The BMC had tons of supporters in the MSA. They got as far as they did because they had supporters in the MSA. And here's where one of my criticisms against the MSA will come into being here, to be invoked. The MSA was in dereliction of its duty to justify its actions and to enforce its standards according to Quranic Sunnah and its own constitution, because you had pushy individuals who were pushing for their ideas, and you just relented. Don't contradict that person, she's a sister, and we don't want to seem to be sexist. Yeah? There were 4 times that the MSA apologized, even though there was no reason for them to apologize. They just said, let's just apologize, even though they clearly didn't think that was what they had to do. But they did it anyway, just appease them. And yet, the BMCs said that they were the ones being bullied. I believe it's called gaslighting, when the person who does the crime accuses the victim of that crime, right? Now, am I just making this claim? Okay, maybe I'm making this claim. Please read the report for yourself. We documented all the insults, the mocking words, the spurious claims they used when they didn't get their way. By getting their way, I mean when one individual of the MSA simply just puts like, can we please maybe, if it's not so much of trouble, just have a little bit of dalil for what you're saying? How dare you? Right? Yeah, you're saying true, isn't it? Yes. And if you think that I'm overreacting to portraying that, again, read the report. The reason that we wanted, that we really wanted to kind of make Zahra Faris the lead of this was because when the MSA came to us, and they were full of self-doubts. They'd been gaslit so much, they were doubting themselves. And they thought maybe, I don't know, in our interactions, maybe as guys, we don't understand how we come off. Maybe, do we sound like that to women? Maybe we don't know. And you might say, but Abdullah, surely to know what the tone was, you'd have to have been present at the interactions. Well, actually, the interactions were mostly written text online. You can see the tone there and then for yourself, right? And so Zahra Faris looks at it, and subhanAllah, she says, no, these people are just rude. How they treated you, no, you weren't being sexist to them, they were just being rude and pushy, right? So we thought, because maybe, I said, men might not realize what we do, maybe we come off pushy and rude and so on and so forth, so we wanted a sister to be the main lead, the one that would check all the evidences, the one that would, if any claim was made that was unsubstantiated, she'd point it out, she would insist on context, she would insist on looking at the evidences herself, because maybe there's male bias somewhere there. They were that worried about themselves, they were that self-reproaching and full of self-doubt that they requested that. Okay. The BMC did not accept the wording of the MSA's counter-proposal, of course, and they went forward to apply the constitutional change. Of course, it failed, and later on they complained about it by saying that the MSA was racist, and it denied it. It just said no to it. After significant investigation, we identified a number of instances of non-Islamic moral and political theories being the primary cause between disputes, and we'll get to that. Now, a couple months ago, I was kind of almost forced into kind of trying to fight a fire that was happening in the MSA when the BMC accused the MSA Instagram account of blocking individual members, just blocking these individual members. So after inquiring about this, obviously the MSA said no, they didn't. They blocked the BMC's official account after the BMC made these public statements against the MSA of accusations. The official account is an official account, but the individual members weren't blocked. So obviously we demanded evidence, like, okay, we need evidence now, because as the Prophet Muhammad said, to paraphrase, the burden of proof is upon the claimant, because if it wasn't, people could take anything they want and say anything they want, right? To paraphrase the hadith. So this is what the Prophet Muhammad told us. He didn't say to us, you must agree with the subjectivity of someone if they are a bit of an oppressed class or a minority class. It didn't say that. It's not our criteria. Okay, our criteria is evidence. Yeah. So then, when the BMC was challenged of this, they produced screenshots of what looked like a blocked kind of account from the MSA. But curiously, there was no profile image to show the profile who was being blocked. Okay. And even though the MSA said, bring it, and we told the MSA to demand the BMC just simply produce a screenshot that shows their profile being blocked on the MSA page, and they didn't. It was nothing there, curiously blank. Unfortunately, Instagram doesn't care about giving you block histories or what have you, so they didn't respond to the MSA's inquiry, which we ensured they did send. And at that point, the MSA was under a lot of slander. One executive of the MSA left, a man that deserts his post, trying to represent the Deen of Islam. he needs to think about his life, I think. And I'm sorry, I have to say this, but you deserted your post. Your life was not even threatened, and you ran off. Yeah, I'm sorry, that has to be called out, right? Anyway, Barakallahu feekum to the sisters VP, the president, the VP president, and the brothers VP president who stayed firm with the MSA despite the pressure they received. And in one case, we documented that a type of what would fit the definition of manipulation against the brothers VP, where one sister said, "I see great potential in you. I know you do the right thing. You know, just leave the MSA, right?" Because he shared the message with us, and so we documented it so that you get to see what the tactics that are being used. So during that time, I made a tweet asking people to help. I made a tweet and I think an Instagram story saying that these left-wing supposed Muslims or supposed left-wing Muslims, I think what it was, are attacking the MSA, please help them. And they said, "Oh, supposed, he's doing takfir on us, he's saying we're not Muslim." Well, supposed as in, you're supposed to be Muslims, why are you attacking the Muslim Student Association, right? Besides, supposed is actually technically accurate because supposed means you're Muslim or you are whatever you're being described, but you might not be. There's a possibility you might not be. And that's the same with everybody. You know, anyone could be a munafiq, right? Secretly, right? The point is you don't know who's a munafiq, right? But technically, to you, everyone is a supposed Muslim, right? So technically, it's true. So, but anyway, they claimed I did takfir, and yet they themselves insinuated takfir against people who disagreed with their position. If you weren't a Marxist Muslim, you were committing, in essence, it seems like a type of shirk or a multi-theism, as they say. You mean polytheism, so shirk, basically. Yeah, or we're not worshipping God by not being Marxist, apparently. Right? This is what they'll say, because you think that liberals and socialist Muslims and Marxist Muslims, you think that, just one second, I'll get to you, sister, okay? You think that they just want to say, just please let us our interpretation of Islam. We won't bother anybody. We just want to be recognized as having valid. No. It's a kind of them or us thing because they think that their interpretation is the correct Islam, is what justice requires. That means you're following unjust Islam, and Islam can't be unjust, therefore you're not really following Islam. So it's not like a let's live and let live. It's more like, for their perspective, it's them or you, right? And they'll choose them. Yeah, so they'll takfir you. If they had the numbers, they would takfir you, straight up. Sister, you raised your hand. Please go ahead. So say again, sorry. Say louder, sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so the sister said, and correct me if I misrepresented you, that she thinks that the Taliban are kafir because they bomb and kill Muslims, and so there are certain actions that can take you outside the fold of Islam, and so because of their actions against Muslims, she considers them to be not Muslim. Is that correct characterization? Yeah. Okay. Well, then I'd have to say that's not the Islamic perspective, because unless you're praying to an idol or you're declaring that there is no God by your tongue, okay. There's the Ahmadis believe that if you give up the prayer, then you're not Muslim either. But basically, unless you're doing and not doing certain things, you remain Muslim. The Khawarij were killing Muslims, and yet no one called them disbelievers, including Imam Ali radiallahu anhu, and they were killing Muslims. Right? So even if I concede what you say about the Taliban, because we won't go into details about politics and so on and so forth, they would still be Muslim. And if you're arguing that doing bad actions or sins or transgressions makes you non-Muslim, ironically, that is the Aqidah of the Khawarij. The Khawarij believe that doing sins makes you a kafir, which is why they killed so many Muslims, because they said, you're all apostates now because you do sin, you do major sins, so we're going to kill you now because you're apostates, right? Whereas the mainstream Muslims will say that doing even major sins, the kaba'ir, doesn't make you a kafir. You have a comeback, please. Okay, so the sister said that Ibn Taymiyyah said that people who were like committing zina at that moment are not Muslim, or you made the second point was the other one, Ibn Taymiyyah and who else? Ibn Taymiyyah and what was it? Was the second example? And insulting the Sahabas. Okay, so that makes you non-Muslim. But okay, so then you could say that the Taliban, while they're killing someone in that moment, they're non-Muslim. But generally speaking, they'd still be Muslim, I suppose, even if you're going to follow that logic. But you couldn't say that they are, because the Khawarij were killing Muslims. And even Ibn Taymiyyah, who talks about the Khawarij, he actually says they are Muslim, even though they killed other Muslims. So if you cite Ibn Taymiyyah, then you have to cite his other stuff that he says about the Khawarij. And as for insulting the Sahabas, that would be, I suppose, a matter of creed, because that would mean that you believe the Sahabas are evil or munafiqs or so on and so forth. Whereas doing an action is not a matter of creed per se and doesn't render you outside the fold of Islam. Although if you are an Ibadi Muslim who follow similar creeds to the Khawarij, but they're like peaceful. Now, yeah, if you're Ibadi, then I respect that, that's fine. Then if you're Ibadi, okay, you want to believe that every Muslim here that does major sins are kafir, then that would be your opinion as an Ibadi. But as a Sunni Muslim, that's not our perspective as Sunnis. And so, who I'm assuming is Sunni, although I could be wrong, but even if she was Shia, even the Shias have the same opinion, that killing people doesn't make you a disbeliever. And my point being that if the BMC wanted to complain about me doing takfir, even over a very light comment, how would they respond to their own people doing open takfir and more clear? Much more clear than the alleged takfir I did, apparently. Yeah, that would be my point. So if you're going to hold people to a standard, you need to hold yourself to the same standard. That's why it's in the report. Okay, but thank you for your contention, sister. I like it. Anyone else? You have a contention with me, please raise it, right? Don't just take what I say, yeah? I like it, okay? Just challenge it. Challenge if we've done something wrong or you think this is all unjust, what the report has said or is. I want you to raise your contentions. Please do so. The MSA planned, the MSA had an anti-racism project. It started called the Black Muslim Initiative, and this was 5 months before the murder of George Floyd. They did it after a lecture by Sheikh Jafar, who I know and is a very good friend of mine. He's an amazing sheikh. Please have him back. Much more times, because he is, subhanAllah, I mean, I know you've had him quite a lot already, but like, just keep bringing him back, because subhanAllah, his knowledge is only matched by his humbleness, subhanAllah. He's an amazing sheikh, and I'm privileged to call him a friend. Because he stressed the issue of how black Muslims are treated by Jahil Muslims, which is a valid point, yeah, that Muslims need to do more to eliminate anti-black Jahiliyyah, right? The MSA initiated an anti-racism project based the very next day after his lecture, as you can see in the studies, right? Very different from the BMC's portrayal, where they omitted that and they simply talked about George Floyd and the popular reaction to George Floyd being the cause for the MSA's initiation of the Black Muslim Initiative. Just a few points. Other findings. We found no instances of racism by the MSA collectively in their policies, explicit, implied in speech, or in the policies of the MSA. The MSA has consistently supported what I call anti-kibr, arrogance, believing you're better than other people, kibr. Anti-kibr events with black speakers since 2020. The MSA has issued 2 public statements against racism and police brutality. The history of MSA presence shows there's no preference or preponderance of one ethnicity. Every single year, there's a Muslim from a different ethnicity, whether Bengali or Arab or Iraqi Turkmen, which is not big. But there was one ethnicity that came more than once. There was one ethnicity that came more than once. Want to guess what it was? Somali. Right? So, it's up on there, guys. It's not a trick question. It's like, just literally, it's in bold. Right? Okay, but there was instances of members of the MSA engaging in what you might call racist comments. That was the case. We found that, and we're going to go right into that. The 2 incidents of racism mentioned by the BMC co-founders We investigated these claims because it was all discussed and all presented, and we found that these were not merited at all whatsoever. Even Sheikh Jafar, we consulted on it to review it, and he mentioned he saw no racism there at all in the evidences. So we had to bother the poor guy because of you guys. Come on, give the guy a rest, yeah? But mashallah, he gave his time to look at it and review it. Okay. Now, this is a bit of a bulk text here by one sister, the Afghani sister, of course. I've put it in acronyms just in case, in the initials, just in case she changes her mind about her course and wants to remain private. So this recorded event won't mention her name. Okay? Because as Muslims, we always give a door open for Muslims to come back in and realize their mistakes and never hold them against it perpetually. Yeah. Like, because we don't know if people, even left-wing Muslims, we don't know if they might be sincere. They just are misguided, but they're still sincere. And of course, if that's the case, because they're still Muslim, we love them for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we want the best for them, and we don't want them to be inconvenienced. Okay? Even if they are public speakers and made it public. But you know, if a public speaker does tawbah and recants their statement, then it should be forgotten, I think. Yeah? Okay, that's in case she wants to retract. She mentions that this is in 2020, right, before all the sexism and racism claims would be generated later on. She records that she finds it perplexing when she's speaking to the BMC members, their claims of their grievances with MSA. She herself says that they have a lot of misunderstandings. But even she admitted when she first spoke to them, when they made claims about the MSA, that they had a lot of misunderstandings. And you'll see here, she mentioned that the MSA can seem like an uncomfortable place, a judgmental place. She says that. But what she says is that, as I said, this year I've witnessed quite a lot of dramas and negative folks out there that discourage you from becoming part of the MSA. Not sure between the guys, but I have seen it happen between girls sometimes. She didn't remark that men are mistreating sisters at the MSA or abusing them at the MSA. She doesn't even know what's happening with the guys, basically. She's only ever seen negative treatment at MSA between sisters, right? You said have a comment or contention?
Someone under the name Zainab Bell just airdropped me a note. It says, so Abdullah Al-Andalusi is getting involved in the conflict between MSA and BMC, and here to back up MSA. You would think a notable public figure would, in a more meaningful way, not come all the way from the UK for this. What a waste of time. And she's asking me to raise it up with the Sheikh. And for those who know...
The Sheikh?
I don't know.
Oh.
And this Zainab is here in the hall because otherwise she could have not sent me this because it's via Bluetooth. So she's at least 1 kilometer away. Okay. So she said, it seems that Abdullah... Huh? Okay. It seems like this Abdullah Al-Andalusi is intimately involved in supporting the MSA against the BMC, and why would he be concerned coming over 1,000 or quite a few thousand kilometers, come all the way here to get involved in the ruckus? Well, quite simply is the point that I'm not in support of the BMC or the MSA. I'm here in support of the Haqq. I am Abdul Haqq. We're all Abdul Haqq. That's who we worship, the truth, and wherever the truth leads, even against ourselves. So my question would be to anyone who is a supporter of either the MSA or the BMC and have ever urged you to support the BMC or MSA without any evidence, right, that you should listen to the words of the Creator when he says, stand forth for justice even against yourselves. It means against your friends if your friends are wrong, right? It doesn't apply when it means against all the Muslims you conveniently don't like. You know, it means against people that you like, your people. Your group, your clique, your friendship group, your tribe, whatever. That's what it means. So if you're a friend of these people and you're defending them simply because they're your friends, then you need to fit Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and be a slave to the truth and not a slave to friendship, or not a slave for social validation, basically. Right? As to why I would get involved, because I'm a Muslim, you're part of the Ummah, you're my family. Everywhere is my family, everywhere is my concern. Right? If you look at my Twitter,
and Facebook and so, but Twitter mostly, I kind of bombard my subscribers with what might appear to them to be random news reports from various parts of the Muslim world or where Muslims are being persecuted every day, highlighting and raising the plight of Muslims everywhere, because everywhere there's Muslims is my family, and if they are suffering from disputes, or especially if they're being lied to and under Kufr, then that concerns me personally. Okay, I can't be everywhere, of course. I'll try my best, but since I've come to Vancouver, and maybe because I like poutine, but because I'm here for the Ummah, I'm here to I'll be here to defend whoever is being oppressed, right? What does it say? What does the Prophet Muhammad say? Defend your brother, because we also mean sister too, whether he's the oppressed or the oppressor. So the Sahabas asked, we understand about defending your brother if he's oppressed, but what about defending him when he's the oppressor? By preventing him from oppressing. So if those who are involved in oppressing and are continuing to do it, they need to be prevented by their actions being made public. Well, their public actions being made more known and also identified and warned about to the public, because they already are public. You have a point or contention, brother?
Not a contention. Am I allowed to make a complimentary point to what you said? Is that permitted or not?
For the interest of time, save it for the end, inshallah.
Just with respect to that comment.
Okay, very brief. Make it very brief.
So I have 3 things to say with response to
Okay.
Very quickly. Point number one, what's happening in this MSA is indicative of a culture war that's happening across North America. I'm privy to many, many such cases. Number 2, it is highly disingenuous for you to single this day out when he spent 4 days detailing various different ideologies and touching upon that. So it's much bigger than just this. And the third thing is just a red herring. You simply don't like that you guys got caught. Understood.
Okay, brother, thank you for that point. Okay. All right then. So this week I discussed different ideologies with quotations from these different the ideologues of these ideologies, these different ideas. Here's how it is relevant. You need to understand how a left-wing person thinks, otherwise you won't understand their actions. Okay? Very briefly, Karl Marx said that he's a materialist. Ideas don't come out from your head, they don't come from revelation, they come as a reflection of material reality. And of course, what were humans doing before they had culture? They were surviving by making food for themselves and hunting, what have you. So Karl Marx said that culture, religion, law, ideals all come from economics. They come from the means of production, the axe, the plow, the tractor, and so on and so forth. And your ideas in your head are actually all an illusion. They are simply a replication of the structure of society in your head. Okay? Because you are an ensemble of social relations, he said, i.e. your ideas are just a reflection of your social structure, to long story short, right? So your religion is basically an illusion, and more represents the fact that you are being oppressed because you desire a heaven and you see a God above there. But really what that means is that you're being oppressed by the capitalist system, because you could be living a heaven on earth, and I suppose you as the individual in a way will probably be the God that you seek, is what he's arguing, because the individual, as they say, is the God. They are the true gods, right? You have your own choices, you make your own sovereign individual. So why do I mention this? Why do I mention this? Because they say that evil doesn't come from humans doing individual actions. Evil comes from society telling you these ideas in your head, making you evil by giving you bad ideas into your head. So if you're racist, it's not because you just are a stuck-up, arrogant individual. No, it's because you're usually part of an oppressor group against an oppressed group, and your racism is merely reinforcing that social hierarchy, because your social hierarchy is in your head. I'm horribly summarizing it for you guys because I don't have much time. So if any Marxist says that's not exactly the terminology he's used, well, refer to my lecture where I talked about, I used exact terminology that he used. I'm just trying to summarize it for you guys. Anyway, the neo-Marxists, this was a slide from 2 days ago, 3 days ago. They noticed that Karl Marx's ideas didn't predict what would happen. They thought there would be a big revolution in the West, and the workers would rise up and kick off the capitalist bourgeois ruling class. That didn't happen. They had to try to explain it. So how did they explain it? right? They said actually Karl Marx was maybe slightly wrong, kind of, or if we just reinterpret him maybe. And one thing, the ideas in your head, once this ruling system is created, which is Karl Marx called ideology, it's the ruling system, the ruling set of ideas, which come from the economic system, which are a reflection of the economic system and social structure. This ideology can actually survive by itself and protect itself and reproduce itself such that the working classes won't rise up because they are being deluded by ideology to think they are free. Okay, it's made a delusion that they are free, and so if you're going to help them, you have to expose this ideology that makes them oppressed, as in a working class, exploited, and so on and so forth. And the neo-Marxists didn't stop there. They said, well, why not just, we applied it to working classes, why not apply it to other attributes that exist, identity attributes, like race, like gender, like sexual orientation, like disability, that's also a thing, you just haven't heard of it, where there's the normalization of ableism against the disabled, and so on and so forth, right? They say that's all part of this oppressive structure. That's why you'll hear them say racism is structural. It's in this hidden ether that is manifested in laws and manifested in cultural products by society, but exists in this hidden ether somewhere called the structure, or Karl Marx called it the superstructure, but they call it this as a structure for short, which reproduces racism as a set of power relations between an oppressor group and an oppressed group. That was the point of ideology. That's what it does. But not just racism, sexism, patriarchy basically, and capitalist bourgeois versus the working classes, and the heteronormative or phallocentric society against those who are queer or homosexual. The lens was applied to every attribute, basically. They applied to every single attribute. So critical race theory is just the idea that the solution to this, neo-Marxists said, is you have to criticize the ideology. It's called ideology critique, otherwise known as critical theory. But when you apply it to different things, you hear it called critical gender studies, or just gender theory, or queer theory, or critical race theory. Right? That's a little primer for you. I've heavily summarized it, basically. Why is critical race theory called neo-Marxist? Kimberly Crenshaw and Derek Bell, the two main founders of critical race theory. No one will dispute that, of course. She's also famous for coining the term intersectionality, if you've ever heard that, because if you're thinking about race, and another one's thinking about gender, and another one's thinking about class, and the neo-Marxists didn't want to say, like, you guys are all wrong, my lens is correct. So Kimberly Crenshaw suggested a type of, let's all live together, and say that all these lenses are correct. Intersectional, all the angles are correct to look at, and to look at social hierarchy from. So she herself says that in the book Critical Race Theory, which is kind of like an anthology of early literature on critical race theory, she says that the critical scholars get their ideology from the work of Antonio Gramsci, an Italian neo-Marxist theorist, because he in essence was one of the first the people to really interpret Marx in a different way, taking out the stuff that didn't work and reinterpreting him to talk about structural racism as something that can exist independent of the economic system. It's I'm summarizing it, but anyway. So neo-Marxists, how do they argue that you should fight against the ruling classes, or the ruling factions? The first thing you need to do is you need to get your group into your own faction. You need to create your own faction out of your oppressed identity group. So if you're queer or you're LGBT, whatever the LGBT, you must form an LGBT class, right? Or realize that you're being oppressed as a class, they would say. That you're already a class, you just don't realize it. If you're black, you must realize that you're being oppressed as a class, and therefore black people must congregate together, form a common front and group to fight against this. If you're a female, of course, or you identify as a woman, you must form your class, and so on and so forth. And if you're disabled, you must form your class, and so on and so forth. They call it consciousness raising, right? Or class, because of class consciousness, raising consciousness of yourself as a class. If we see from Sister LJ, one of the main individuals in BMC, she had argued that, she said without consultation of every UBC black Muslim, she just declared it, that black people feel they need another club. Okay? She also said, no minority group has ever, nobody being oppressed, has ever created long-term systemic change by asking permission. So they wanted their own club for their own, to give their own clout and for their own power to change things. Of course, Derek Bell and of course Delgado, who are both critical race theorists, argue that, again, said critical race scholars identify and embrace a radical tradition of race-conscious mobilization. That's what Derek Bell says. And of course, Delgado also mentions that as marginalized people, we should strive to increase our power and cohesiveness. Delgado is actually, I believe, Latino. He's not black, but there's also Latino critical race theory, by the way, just so in case you wanted to know that. Are they consistent on that? They're pretty consistent. But also, these same individuals established a Muslim Women's Chapter Club. They've not established it, they've applied for it. So now, not just, because okay, you have your safe space, right? You have your Black Muslim Collective. It's pretty much women in there, only women as the executives and so on and so forth. So, but no, because you need the other identity group now to have its specific consciousness, and it must be women. And so they applied for it, and all the names of the people who applied for it are in the bottom there. All these individuals, LJ and AH, all these individuals, and Sister D. Sorry, it's a typo missing out the sister, but it's intended to put the sister on them. There's no meaning behind that. They've been called sister elsewhere, like Sister LJ there, so no one says, oh, you didn't call him sister. I intend to put sister there, sorry, it was just a mistake. But we see that feminists have said since the 60s, and they mentioned this, they said, our chief task at present is to develop female class consciousness through sharing experience and publicly exposing the sexist foundation of our institutions. And for us, who in the 1960s said, the old left, referring to the Marxists, so they used to say that the workers don't know they're oppressed, so we have to raise consciousness. One night at a meeting I said, would everybody please give me an example from their own life of how they experience oppression as a woman? I need to hear it to raise my own consciousness. And then it was recorded by Susan Brown Miller that from then on she sort of made it she sort of made it an institution and called it consciousness raising. So again, feminists would use the same tactic, that you must create groups based on your identity, separate from the oppressor classes or what have you, make your own group to fight for your own rights. We see that the BMC are quite consistent in known neo-Marxist kind of teachings, following them. What does the Quran say? And hold firm to the rope of Allah altogether and do not become divided. Right? Or it says, he is not one of us who calls to asabiyya, right? It means groupism, factionalism, or sectarianism. He is not one of us who fights for the sake of asabiyya. He is not one of us who dies for the sake of asabiyya. That applies in all cases for all, especially ethnicity, which Muslims have a big problem with, massive problem with at the moment, right? Asabiyya is forbidden. You can't say, look, the Aus and Khazraj, one was the majority, one was the minority. And even after Islam, they were still mocking each other about old battles that happened between them, right? Would it have been fair for the minority tribe to say, in order to combat tribal asabiyya against us in this society in Medina, we need to form ourselves into our own class and fight against the majority tribe or tussle against them as a means to change? What did the Prophet Muhammad say? He said, leave all this, it's rotten, right? He was saying that Muslims still have jahiliyyah in them. To view yourself as a separate faction that should be by which your right should be gotten by means of a conflict is asabiyya. It is fighting. Because why do you think factions form in the first place? It's because they think, well, we're not being treated right, so they start fighting. The Kurds in Turkey think that they're not being treated right by the Turks, which, to be fair, is true on the whole. And the response is, we need a separate state, a nation state. Basically, a safe space for Kurds is what they're arguing that, yeah? Just using older terminology, not newer terminology. Okay, now here's the big issue. Sigmund Freud, you don't have to read all this, but Sigmund Freud, he argued that you can have things in your head that you don't realize, and that you might do things for reasons you're not fully conscious of, but they motivate you regardless. So he was famous for saying that every boy secretly wants to murder his father and sleep with his mother. It's called the Oedipus complex. Why is that? You haven't heard of this? Oedipus? No? You've heard of it, right? Like, please Google it, right? Don't just say, Abdullah says something crazy, like he's just making it up. No, I'm not. He's making it up. But please, it's called Oedipus complex. Please Google it, yeah? Right? Please check. Now you might think, what's this got to do with anything? Abdullah, Sigmund Freud, yeah, we know of him, psychoanalyst, yeah, what's the big deal? He would influence neo-Marxists. He would influence neo-Marxists in a very big way, because when Karl Marx predicted that the workers would never be given rights, workers would be given, their wage would go down, and their hours would go up, and the profits would go up, and they would basically reach the point where they can't take anymore, and they would rise up. What happened was, workers got rights. They got the right to vote. So suffrage for poor people, because poor people couldn't vote before. They got minimum wage, they got welfare. All the things Karl Marx predicted wouldn't happen. Okay? So what did the neo-Marxists do to explain this? Did they say, oh, Marx was wrong? Nope. They say, well, when in the West, when they give you these rights, these workers' rights and so on, to make you feel like you have value, they care about your life and so on, that's what they want you to think. It's all part of their cunning plan. Okay? Secretly, you're even more oppressed than ever before. Well, I'm pretty sure that workers here have it better than 19th century coal mine workers or factory workers. When you lose a limb, bye-bye, you're fired, no welfare, nothing, you know, and you go to starve on the streets. You have it better. But they say, no, because by giving you welfare, you think you're comfortable, and that's why you don't rise up. Hence, you're even more oppressed than ever before, because you don't realize you're being oppressed. That they would concoct suspicions and conspiracy theories to explain things that don't fit with Marxism. And that's what would happen. That's what we notice, things like this in the BMC. Okay, let me give you an example. So Horkheimer, writing in his book Traditional and Critical Theory, he talks about that Western academics, people who are academics in the West, don't trust on them to change the system. Why? Because they are part of the system, and Gramsci would argue they reinforce the system. They're designed to reinforce the system. Okay? Audre Lorde, who was actually quoted by Sister LJ, says the same thing. She quoted Audre Lorde, which said that the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. Meaning, I don't know why it was aimed at me per se. I think they were trying to say that because I was a white guy, because I'm a white man, you can't trust a white man to dismantle white supremacy. Well, or white passing anyway, because I'm like part North African, but everyone forgets that. So you can't trust him because he's not to tell the truth or to know about theories espoused by political philosophers, which they write in books in language which is an English language. I can read it. Right? You won't be able to understand that because you're white, and you'll never be able to change the system because you are a beneficiary of the system, and your mind, your ideas in your mind are basically a replication of this system. You're white, and the white patriarchy is in trouble. Also white patriarchy, but white supremacy is in power. Therefore, you can't change it. You're part of that. You're part of the problem. And they used it against me when I came last year and gave a discussion on feminism, critical race theory. They used this argument. I think you can see where it's traced. It's traced from neo-Marxist arguments. By the way, Horkheimer is Jewish, but he's white passing, funnily enough. So it's okay to say this stuff if you're to be on their side if you're white or white passing, right? But if you criticize it and you're white, oh no, he doesn't know he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's white, right? Neo-Marxists believe in standpoint epistemology. They believe that basically if you're in the minority, you have better information about oppression than those in the majority, but you know the system better than those in the majority. That means if you disagree with them, you are reinforcing oppression. Right? If you disagree with someone, they say X, Y, and Z. You disagree. Say, oh, you even ask for evidence. You just say, give me evidence, and they say, well, then you're denying the fact that I have a superior subjective knowledge than yourself, because they believe that knowledge is subjective, is socially constructed, and so they have a better knowledge of oppression. So if you deny, or you say no to them, or you say, could you just give us evidence? You don't have a reason to say that. You have no basis to say that. Of course, in Islam, we see that it says it judged between them by what Allah has revealed. It also says that if people were given in accordance with their claims, men would claim the wealth and lives of other people. Rather, the burden of proof is on the claimant. You need to produce evidence. This is the Islamic basis and perspective. And of course, if the truth had been following their inclinations, the heavens and the earth would be ruined, basically, to paraphrase the verse of the Quran. So you can't trust people's inclinations when they tell you, I feel this, you must believe me because I have this skin color, or I am this gender, or what have you, personally, right? That's never been a basis in Islam. But neo-Marxism makes it the basis. Okay, very quickly, well, actually, this is not this. Okay, so Roland Barthes, who is a French thinker, he says that basically what matters about books is not what the author intended, but what you want to interpret from the book. So if you argue that Quran and Sunnah says one thing, they say, no, that's not what Allah says, that's what you're saying. You're a man, or you're white adjacent, or you're, if you're not white exactly, but you're near white, or what have you, if you're like Asian, or what have you, Asian being South Asian, sorry, in England that's what Asian means. So they don't care if you cite Quran and Sunnah, they'll say that's your patriarchal, white adjacent, heteronormative, ableist approach, a cisgendered also approach. They'll say we can't take anything you say. Michel Foucault argued that power doesn't just come from the top down, but well, he was like an ex-Marxist, but he took some ideas and he said that there's such a thing called a narrative, or grand narratives, or meta-narratives. These are his version of the Marxist idea of ideology. They're in your head, and it makes you have certain power relations with other individuals, so that you can be oppressed, not just by the government, or by the government institutions that Marx has said, but by every individual around you. How they treat you can reproduce the oppression. You might think, why is that important? Well, because critical race theory will say that in a book called Words That Wound, Mari Matsuda, who's actually Japanese, by the way, he argues that racist speech is particularly harmful because it is a mechanism of subordination reinforcing a historically vertical relationship. Likewise, feminists would argue the same thing, because they're all neo-Marxists, they just apply it to a different lens. And they say that gender is reproduced through gender relations to maintain dominant groups' privilege. And she argues that gender oppression is the process that limits one's or prohibits one's freedom, dignity, or subjectivity. Subjectivity, what it means is that if you disagree or challenge or ask evidence of any woman's opinions, you're not just asking for evidence. You're not just treating her like you treat anybody else. No, you are reinforcing oppression against women by challenging their subjectivity. Because there is no objectivity. So if you disagree, you're challenging their subjectivity, and you're doing it to reinforce the oppression. You see how this conspiracy theory that's like, oh, people aren't disagreeing with you, they're actually challenging you as a woman. Right? Or they're challenging you as a black man, as a disabled person, as a homosexual, all the lenses that, as a Latino, as a Japanese, whatever, all the lenses that they use. And that means that when they try to interpret things, they're going to get it really, really bad. Of course, the Quran says, and the Prophet Muhammad taught, against suspicion. The Prophet Muhammad said, beware of suspicion. Suspicion is the worst of false tales. Now, let me just, there's quite a few things, but I want to just show you this one thing, actually. Let's go to, yes. Okay, no, this one, so this one, right? So, Sister D.I., who I believe is Sudanese, does anyone know if she's Sudanese Arab or just Sudanese, because it's important. Anyone know? Does she speak Arabic? Is she Sudanese Arab?
Yeah.
Huh?
Arab.
She's Sudanese Arab. You sure? How do you know that? I have to ask for evidence, right? It kind of goes against what I've been saying. How do you know that? She said it?
My sister knows her.
Your sister-in-law knows her. Okay. I'll take it on trust then, but with that caveat that he could have misheard, right? Okay, that's very interesting to know then. I really appreciate you telling me this. Wait for the next slides, guys. I know I've been a bit long in this, I know, but we were delayed, yeah? Wait for the next slide, yeah? It's going to get really spicy. Okay, so there was an event that the MSA held in 2020. It was called Elephant in the Masjid. Sheikh Jafar was invited, or it was officially part of the Phase 2 event that the MSA had planned to hold. Does anyone remember Elephant in the Masjid? Hands up, Elephant in the Masjid. I mean, not an actual elephant in the masjid. I mean, it's called an elephant in the masjid, as an elephant in the room, but they thought, you know, they'd be clever with the masjid. Okay, anyway, I didn't invent the title. All right. So Sheikh Jafar is invited to talk about kind of anti-black asabiya and kibr and so on and so forth. The video is up online, you can check out for yourself. Amazing video, as always. Brilliant discussion, masterful, and he gives arguments from an Islamic lens. And so again, you have much to learn from him on these topics and other topics, because he can tell you a lot about Maliki fiqh and a whole bunch of other stuff. I could have tons of conversations anyway. So during the Q&A, the MSA, so before the Q&A, the MSA said, can you submit your questions, because it was live being streamed, via Google Forms. Okay, so about 10 questions were submitted. They're all on the report, you can see them for yourself. So randomly, because it was co-hosted in a way by, so Sister Di was one of the co-hosts or co-chairs, and one of the MSA individuals was a co-chair. So they both had access to the questions. So they were picking up questions to say, and then the Sheikh would answer these questions. And randomly, out of the blue, Sister Di says, I just wanted to jump in and say that a lot of the questions that we've received through this form, a lot of the questions, I think, are explicitly racist. Please be aware, it's not the job of the black community to answer your comments and your questions, where the answer is just don't be racist. There are so many ways that you can educate yourselves and confront your racial biases. You can read books and educate yourselves and watch lectures and videos and so on and so forth. I just want to put this out there after reading the questions we got on the Google form. So the MSA were like, oh, what, really? Everyone was like, well, what questions were out there? You know, like, because not all of them were read out. So, but the 10 questions that were received, of course, the MSA, you can see them having chat, like, wait a second, they look for it, like, so which one is the racist one? Including the Afghan sister who is a supporter of BMC, herself remarked, it doesn't look like it doesn't seem racist to me. In case maybe we were looking at through some kind of lens, or some kind of racial lens that we because of our apparent privilege, that means this, which is invisible to us apparently, maybe we didn't see it. So we sent it to Sheikh Jafar to confirm what we already knew, because I tried to break it down. Is any bias or assumption in there that somehow is condescending or patronizing in any way, shape or form to black Muslims in these questions, or black people generally? Sheikh Jafar says nothing racist in there to me. Right, you can see for yourself, you can read the questions for yourself, please, right? If you find something racism in it, some racist, please tell me, I'd like to know. We'd like to know, okay? But then the question is, why did she say that? And what, it's not the job of black people to educate you at an event where there's a black sheikh educating Muslims on racism. What, should we just say to the sheikh, to the black sheikh, you're black sheikh, don't educate us. Don't educate us. We'll have to learn it ourselves. What? I mean, you should be learning from the shuyukh. Doesn't matter what color they are, right? It's almost weird. Why would you mention this? Where would this come from? Yeah? Well, here's the answer. Let's read it together, shall we? Audre Lorde again. She describes herself as a black lesbian feminist. She wrote, whenever there is the need for some pretense of communication, whenever the need for some pretense of communication arises, those who profit from our oppression call upon us to share our knowledge with them. In other words, it is the responsibility of the oppressed to teach the oppressors their mistakes. Black and third world people are expected to educate white people as to our humanity. Women are expected to educate men. Lesbians and gay men are expected to educate the heterosexual world. The oppressors maintain their position and evade their responsibility for their own actions. There is a constant drain of energy which might be better used in redefining ourselves and devising realistic scenarios for altering the present and the constructive future. So basically, when the MSA held an event with a black sheikh and an event before that to consult black Muslims as to tell us what we need to change, you know, shura or ma shura, because you're consulting experts, those who know or are on the receiving end, tell us. That wasn't part of a benign reason. That wasn't part of a sincere reason. Audre Lorde, neo-Marxist, tells you what was the real reason. The MSA is doing it as a pretense to maintain their oppression by making black people have to teach non-black people why they're human. That's how you should interpret the actions of the MSA. Right? Do you see how that distorts? There is nothing good the MSA could do, because there's other book called On White Fragility by D'Angelo, which we'll get into that, which talks about that if any organization makes any changes to accommodate more gender, more race, and so on and so forth, that's just a smokescreen in order to maintain the existing power structure. So anything they positively do to end racism, oh, that's what they want you to think. But really, it makes the racism even more hidden, and therefore it's worse. So basically, the MSA, for doing these actions, are worse than if they'd done nothing. Because by doing these actions, these events, these shorter events with black Muslims, by doing these, by having a black sheikh come in, actually more than one time, and a few more black speakers, quite a few of them every year, this only serves to hide the racism in the MSA. You see? Do you understand now why there's nothing you can, as an MSA, could ever do to please them? Because they always have an explanation for your actions. And it's not like they don't know what Audre Lorde says. They cite her. And what the argument was exactly this. Didn't it sound very similar, the argumentation? Or am I mischaracterizing it? Am I seeing a connection that doesn't, a similarity that doesn't exist, perhaps? Okay, so I make this clear, I make this issue here. But we also see other examples, right? So there was a few incidents called the sister incidents, where there was claims of attacks against sisters, not physical attacks, but just like issues, misogyny, incidents of misogyny against sisters at the MSA, defined by these individuals, of course. And the MSA issued a public statement, okay? The public statement was, the major author of the public statement was a sister. But when it was published, it wasn't good enough because apparently it wasn't as punchy. It didn't mention misogyny enough, or it didn't mention misogyny. It didn't mention the words needed to condemn, to be suitably giving condemnation. So, of course, Sister LJ, you could say de facto head, or the greater amongst equals, she goes straight in, messaging the MSA, in essence, in their boards and platforms, to say that basically the MSA clearly are not, well, she's insinuating the MSA don't clearly care about women, that the public statement clearly wasn't written by a woman, right, and it was clearly designed to, in a way, deflect from misogyny, or insinuating these things, right? You can read it for yourself, the exact wording. Please look at the exact wording she used. Of course, someone said that, well, actually, it wasn't a man that, there was no women. It wasn't that it was no women writing. The main writer of this statement was a woman, so she got corrected by this, and she didn't apologize for it. But when LJ is corrected by a brother, one of her colleagues in the BMC, Sister SS, she drops a deflection tactic. She says, "Why are you picking on Sister LJ?" Right? In essence, and she said that you are being racist. It's like, well, we're just correcting Sister LJ on a verifiably inaccurate statement she made, when she actually made an accusation against the MSA president. Right? So he's just trying to, an MSA, so he's trying to defend it by pointing to the facts. It's not racism to do so just because LJ happens to be black. Okay? But they put intention into that person's mind. They imputed intention to that person.
But I just want to add, the wording used is intentionally, like potentially wanting to harm women. That was the wording of the system.
Yes. LJ accused the brother of potentially wanting to harm women. That was what he was reacting to.
Yeah, that was like.
Yeah, and because he wanted to react to it, he was racist for doing so.
And sexist.
So if someone accuses you of potentially wanting to harm women, you have to accept it. Otherwise, if they happen to be a woman or black, you might be sexist or racist by simply defending yourself against that claim if it was verifiably false. Okay? Read it for yourself. Also, there was a sister called ST who was in charge of the media, the MSA media team. So they just get re-elected, they get elected into power, these new execs. She's one of the execs, she is in charge of marketing, she controls the social media account. So she asks all the MSA guys to submit, and girls, to submit their pictures to put as the new MSA team on the Instagram, okay? Of course, she controls it, so she'll put her own picture on, whatever picture she wants to choose, and she happens to choose a picture that doesn't obviously only not have hijab on, but has makeup and is in a certain pose. Now, we didn't repost it in the report, but it's still up there on Instagram, on the Instagram account. So if you want to see it, you can see for yourself. Islamically, some shuyukh will certainly say that's tabarruj, right? Yeah. And some individual in the comment section, who's not with the MSA, he's not an executive of the MSA, maybe he goes to UBC, maybe not. He simply he wrote on the MSA's own comment section on Instagram, he said that, look, he even made a liberal concession. It's not about the right to choose or not for the individual, right? But does it befit the MSA, which is meant to represent Quran and Sunnah, constitutionally speaking, to put up a picture that runs contrary to the ethos of the organization? That caused a storm. And Sister ST seemed to respond with a few arguments, one of them almost implying that she doesn't believe it's haram to, that's not awra or what have you, she can't expose herself and that, so on and so forth. Now look, right, there's no judgment about, when I say judgment, rather, okay, all Muslims sin, yeah? All Muslims sin, men, women, black, white, Arab, Turk, whatever you, all Muslims sin, let's say, saying the obvious. That's not the issue at hand here. The issue at hand is the justification of sinning. That's a different category now. But also in demanding that a Muslim organization that you don't have to join, that's meant to represent the Quran and Sunnah according to its own constitution, must help you and publicize your sin and even normalize it amongst Muslims. And simply because one brother mentioned, not to Sister ST, but to the MSA, that does not fit your ethos perhaps, right, to show this, this was called a misogynistic incident, and the Sister ST complained to the MSA president. MSA president, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to be honest, guy. I have to be honest. You bow down to that. You bent over to that, so to speak, and she wanted to ban the brother from the MSA's own Instagram account. He was messaging the MSA. He wasn't following her where her own account or messaging her in DMs, as far as we're aware. And you acceded to banning him, that guy, who merely was doing what the Quran says, and tell the believing women to lower the gaze, and tell the believing men too, right? But it says tell them, yeah? For simply calling to ma'ruf and forbidding munkar, you acceded to the demands of that sister. You do what they say, and they still call you sexist at the end of it for your labors. I'm sorry, that's where the MSA has to take some shame for it. We have to be honest, otherwise I'm not being objective. Yeah, I'm not being fair. Okay, and that led to an injustice against a Muslim member of the public that could have benefited from the MSA's resources, him being blocked at her behest because she pushed it. Yeah. Okay. So. Now I'm going to end with this last bit before we break up. This is the last bit. This is a spicy bit. We'll kind of end on a bang, but not a literal bang, hopefully, unless the left wingers get in here, perhaps, and they take more aggressive tactics. Okay, Sister LJ said during an MSA meeting, it was reported by an Egyptian brother, that she said, if an Arab country wins the African Cup, I'm going to be chapped. Means angry, right? Yeah? Okay. Right. I'm not mischaracterizing it, am I? Okay. In response to the objection, that the brother who'd be known as AA, right? When he said that was wrong to say, because we're Muslims, why are we supporting one ethnicity or whatever? We don't care about ethnicity. Why do you have to make a racial statement such as that, or an ethnic statement such as that? Sister MHH, right, who actually is Egyptian Arab herself, by the way, but a big supporter of the BMC, and now an executive of the BMC, she said, this further proves our need for anti-racism training in a workshop. He is an Arab. No harm was done to him, and just like I would not stand for a white person pointing racism, I do not stand for him, an Arab, pointing racism, concluding, he will share his thoughts and I will express these facts. This is why we need anti-racism training. Interesting. What you mean anti-racism training that you were proposing is going to resolve this? Because you said it was from Quran and Sunnah, so what are you talking about? Because how does the Quran and Sunnah allow anyone to make such comments, regardless of your social position or whatever in any particular society, wherever you are, okay? And of course, LJ said, was in the minute meetings, you cannot oppress the oppressor. So Arabs are the oppressors. So basically you can, I mean, in theory, this means you can say things like dirty Arab, but as long as you're not white, you're not on a higher ranking of the neo-Marxist ranking system for society. You're on a lower ranking, or you face some. Maybe you're an Assyrian Christian, and you just say, I got treated by Arabs badly in Syria, or something like this. You can say, dirty Arab, or you'll be angry if Arabs win something, or whatever, right? You can say all kinds of, because you're of the oppressed class, and Arabs are oppressors, yeah? And you can say this in Canada, where there is no, I don't think Arabs are really oppressing anyone in Canada and America as a group or a class, but it's okay, because somewhere in the world they're oppressors. Okay. She also took umbrage at even AA even making the complaint in the first place. She said that that his complaint borders on white adjacent fragility. And just so you know, white fragility, now here's a term we can trace. Robin DiAngelo, ironically who's a white woman, oh, by the way, this is funny because the sister of LJ both cites D'Angelo and also rails against her that why are we letting a white woman, well, she doesn't say that, but she intimates, why are we letting a white woman tell us about critical race theory? And then another post, she actually posts her stuff up. It's like, make your mind up, right? Right? Is it white or right or not right? I don't know. Yeah? Skin color epistemology, basically. So truth and falsehood is all based on your skin color. So, because these are neo-Marxists, they have to explain, if you call someone a racist and they react angrily, is it because they don't want to be defamed? Is it because it's not true? No. It's because these behaviors function to reinstate the white racial equilibrium. If you call a white person a racist, is what she's saying, and they are angry about it, they're not angry because they're not racist or because they don't see what you're saying, or you haven't explained it to them properly, like maybe what they said was a microaggression. No. They're angry because they are using this anger to reinstate their racial superiority. So when the Egyptian brother complained, he was even more in the wrong because he's only complaining because he wants to reinforce Arab supremacy against black people. Yeah? Right? Because she says white supremacy, right? We'll say white fragility. Well, here's this definition from the scholar who invented it, right? Let me just. Okay. Now we get to the fun part. I promise you spice. Right? I promise you spice. Now you said that the third member of the BMC is an Arab Sudanese, right? We didn't know this. I kept asking. Now there's a reason why I ask, is she Arab Sudanese? The other two are Somali, yes? The other two are Somali. They represent black people, or they've said that they represent black people on campus or to some degree. Oh, really now? And of course, you can't accept an Arab talking about racism. You know why? Because they oppress black people in Africa, right? So they can't talk about racism against themselves in Canada for some reason. Okay, good to hear. Interesting. Right. But what if we apply that on them themselves? Somalis, Arab Sudanese, what are they doing in Somalia to non-Somalis, otherwise known as Bantus or Jarir Bantus? Right? Yep, my Somali brothers, I know your secrets. All right, I know it. But just in case you might say, I'm a white guy, what do I know about what's happening in Somalia? Okay, well, I'm not going to cite myself. I'm going to cite Somali scholars who studied this. Racism against Bantu Africans for having we call more majoritarian African characteristics. So characteristics that are more in the majority in Africa, because technically African characteristics can mean all kinds of things. Yeah, but let's say typically black African characteristics. So why are they called Jarir? Because Jarir means like tight or tight curls, because they have tighter curls on their hair, whereas Somali hair, like with the guys and girls, it's more wavy. Similar to Egypt, actually similar to Brother AA's hair, similar. It's actually, they're more like Arabs in that sense. Their noses are more pointed. They're not as rounded as Bantu Africans in Somalia. And they like to make fun of people with rounded African noses in Somalia. All African character. You didn't know this, didn't you? You didn't know this, for those who didn't know this, right? Let's just read what they say, because maybe I'm just mischaracterizing. So he says, by the way, Somalia was historically a slave state, so they enslaved Africans, and they had loads of Africans around them. They're called Bantu, or they nicknamed them Jarir. Here's what they say. Somalis believe that all black Africans are slaves. This is a Somali academic speaking here, so he's not white. Somalis believe that all black Africans are slaves and therefore inferior to Somalis, regardless of their actual socio-economic backgrounds or levels of education. Somali hate speech as reference of slave identity and therefore indicate an individual perceived inferior African descent instead of a superior noble claiming Somali of Arab pedigree. Because I think Somalis claim Arab ancestry. To further substantiate the stigma of Africanity in the burden of the broad African nose, an individual called Ayub related the following incident. I was mocked by a Somali who referenced my 2 nostrils of my nose as rooms. He then asked me sarcastically whether he could rent one of my rooms and how much it would cost him per month. All right? There better not be any Somalis laughing about this. There better not be. Oppressors. According to this guy, according to the critical race theorists, oppressors of African characteristics, of typically African hair and typical African noses. They also said, of course, Somali society has a predilection for supremacy. Very critical race theory term that, by the way. But hey, why stop short? Let's keep going, because there's so much interesting things here. They say that the they call it anti-Africanity stigma, it continues even in the Somali diaspora for Somalis abroad. They carry their anti-African, anti-black, typical African racism with them abroad, this Somali academic is saying. For instance, he cited a few other reports or citations. They say that that this racism continues even in Somalis. He says, even a newborn resumes bearing the burden of stigma immediately after birth, regardless of the geographical location of his or her birth, as long as a Somali acquaintance who knows the family lives in that vicinity. So even a Somali Bantu, as long as they're known by another Somali, that they're from Somalia and they're not Somali, they're Bantu, they still face that discrimination on those racist comments from Somalis. They also said that first-generation Somalis actually would say they're not black. Say, I'm not black, I'm Somali, right? So here's a question. Now, I didn't put it in the report because I didn't know, and I'm going to assume, but I'm going to assume it could be wrong, that the third member of the BMC is Arab Sudanese. Now, a reason why I asked it is because I had a lot of research prepared to put in the report if that was the case, but I had to wait for confirmation. I still haven't received it, but I'm going to go on your testimony. I'm going to put a caveat. If she is Arab Sudanese, they too are just as racist against non-Arab African Sudanese. Really, really bad racist. So here's my question to you guys. What is an organization that claims to represent black Africans include that typically African phenotypical features, doing with members exclusively of racial groups that are known to oppress and make racial comments against those very same attributes? What are they doing representing all black people? I can make the same argument against them. I wish you guys did your homework, right? But I study ethnology as a hobby, so when I start to look at the BMC, like, 2 Somalis, 1, she kind of looks like a Sudanese Arab, because I can tell there are differences. Wait a second, they're representing all black Muslims, but there's no West African Muslims, there's no East African Muslims, there's just them. When they, in their own countries, would look down upon the very Muslims, the very black Muslims they would claim they were defending here in Canada, right? And yet, the Arab sister who was part of the BMC said that she won't stand an Arab talking about racism. Okay, be consistent. Don't stand a Somali talking about racism, and don't stand an Arab Sudanese talking about racism. Yeah, be consistent. That's hypocritical now. You're not applying your criteria very in a consistent manner. Anyway, there are hands up. So let's start with the far, okay, but not politically the far left. You, sister, go ahead, please.
Sorry, I just want to clarify. The sister speaks Arabic,
Mhm.
but are you saying like her ethnicity is Arab? Could you just clarify? Just because I've known this sister for a long time, so she does speak Arabic.
Yeah.
But whether or not she identifies as Arab, like what do you define as Arab though at that point?
Sister, also good.
I'm not defending any of her comments. I just want to let you know she does speak Arabic.
Sure. So the sister says that she knows the individual, she speaks Arabic, but what is my basis for calling her Arab? Well, actually, technically, it's that guy's testimony from your, was it sister-in-law or what it was? What was it? Huh? Your sister, right? Your sister is friends with her, right? So I gave an if. I put an if, a big, massive if there. But being Arab is very. I mean, technically speaking, anyone who speaks Arabic is an Arab, all right? But then over time, they became viewed as like an ethnic designation. But in Sudanese, in Sudan, it's irrelevant whether how genetically different or phenotypically different you are from those who are considered to be non-Arabs. These are social constructs in Sudan. And so if you're part of the Arab group, there is notable racism against the non-Arab group in Sudan. No one can deny that. You can go Google it yourself, please. There's your homework. I had stuff to put in the report, but I didn't know this. I need more confirmation than that, though, because I can't rely on that in the report. Like, you know, like some guy's Chacha said that she is. I can't. That's not an isnad I can cite. I need evidence for that. If either she confirms it or like her mother confirms it and says yes, she is. I need family members or her. I can't just rely on hearsay. But obviously, I don't distrust. I'm not saying you're wrong or I don't trust you. I'm simply saying that. I'm going to put a massive if, though. Yeah, but the irony is just dripping there on that. There was someone else who had a comment or contention or... Oh, you just drew me to the attention that she was raising her hand. Okay, sorry. Thank you. So there's that. Then last but not least, I suppose, we'll end with the mandatory racism training. We've already covered it, but I'll just simply relate it to you, and then we'll go for contentions and questions and so on and so forth. Pretty much, the BMC from the very beginning, after their consultation event, sometime afterwards, they said that people who attended the event wanted anti-racism training delivered by a provider called Muslim ARC. Very specific. They were attached almost together, the two proposals. Now, there are some issues that we noticed, irregularities with who suggested anti-racism training and Muslim ARC, but because we weren't absolutely there, we don't know, but we have to mention there could be irregularities there, but we don't know for certain. However, they also mentioned another provider when they were challenged called CCMW, the Council of Canadian Muslim Women, who've gone on public record speaking out against Sharia courts or Sharia tribunals in this country. They don't want it. That's the anti-racism training you want to get for your Muslim Student Association, basically. Those who oppose the Sharia courts. And as for Muslim ARC, we did some due diligence on that. We looked at courses they provided, and we looked into the lectures that they did, which are available online. And of course, they on their own website say they use critical race theory as a framework. They don't say they use Quran and Sunnah as their framework, as their primary framework or whatever. In fact, I don't think they said they were going to use Quran and Sunnah as a lens even at all. So that's what they did. So when the MSA noticed that, racial comments are allowed because, just so it's explained, racism is structural, so you can only be racist if you're an oppressor group to an oppressed, not if you are the oppressed to the oppressor. You can't be racist back. So even if you beat up some weak, poor, homeless white guy on the street, you beat them up, but if you happen to be in a marginalized group, that's technically not racism, even if you're beating them up because they're white, because you're in the disadvantaged group as a class. That's how neo-Marxists think, in essence. So when MSA alarm bells rang, because they kept, whenever they raised issues, they said, don't worry, this will all be solved when you just allow us to give you the anti-racism training we've been dying to give you, basically, right? Well, they're not going to be so enthusiastic about the providers of these anti-racism training. They're going to have lots of questions, especially when racism was justified. Things called white fragility is just justified. And of course, these providers talking about LGBT stuff. And as I said, for those who don't realize, if the basis behind which you oppose racism is you believe that no one should be underprivileged or not have their desires or values treated differently or considered to be less than based on an identity attribute, then you must accept that for every identity attribute. So Derek Bell and Kimberly Crenshaw, the founders of critical race theory, you could say, here's what they say. We emphasize our marginality and turn it towards advantageous perspective building and concrete advocacy on behalf of those oppressed by race and other interlocking factors of gender, economic class, Marxists, and sexual orientation. And of course, Kimberly Crenshaw says the same thing. I consider intersectionality a provisional concept linking contemporary politics with postmodern theory. In mapping the intersections of race and gender, the concept does engage dominant assumptions that race and gender are essentially separate categories. By tracing the categories to these intersections, I hope to suggest a methodology that will ultimately disrupt the tendency to see race and gender as exclusive or separable, while the primary intersections that I explore here are between race and gender. The concept can and should be expanded by factoring issues such as class, sexual orientation, age, and color. So, brothers and sisters, you can see why the MSA were a little bit perturbed by what they were seeing happening in their midst and by these so-called claims of racism and sexism if they didn't relent to these demands. Now, for any of you who think that the Quran somehow requires class-based analysis, but that classes are the basis for good and bad, it's not. I've said this before, but I'll say it again because it's relevant to this, and we'll end on these verses. The Quran, it says, if only you could see when the wrongdoers will be detained before their Lord, throwing blame at each other. The lowly, those on the lower class, basically, will say to the arrogant, the higher class, had it not been for you, we would certainly have been believers. The arrogant will respond to the lowly, did we hinder you from guidance after it came to you? In fact, you were wicked. Anyway, as well, just like them. The lowly will say to the arrogant, no, it was your plotting by day and night when you ordered us to disbelieve in Allah and to set up equals with Him. But they all hide remorse when they see the torment. Both the oppressed and the oppressors, or the upper class and lower class, all going to Jahannam because they believed in disbelief. Right? And here's the fascinating thing. SubhanAllah, the Quran obviously made all the time and space. He knows the future and the present. Here's the interesting thing. Remember when I said about the Enlightenment, right? It's all based on this very fundamental premise that man, the individual human, is his own sovereign. And if we all own ourselves, if we are all the owners of ourselves, the sovereign of ourselves, in essence, the gods of ourselves, then we're all equally gods, right? Because that's why you have to have equality, because one God can't be above the other God because they're all equally sovereign over themselves, right? The Quran says that the oppressed will blame the oppressors because the oppressors commanded them to believe in that could it be that it was telling them to believe that they were equal to God because they're gods in themselves? And because they all believed this, because they all took this aqidah, the same aqidah, even if they were on the lower decks of society, but because they took this aqidah, they all went to Jahannam. The only issue the oppressed have was that they didn't like to be on the lower deck of the boat as it was sailing to Jahannam. It's still, they want to be on the top deck, but still sailing in the same direction, of course. Yeah, and the oppressors will say, we didn't misguide you. Yeah, we didn't force you to be disbelievers, but you could say that they were saying you were so obsessed with this tussle with us that you missed the Kufr ideas that we followed. You took it, you just wanted to be on the top deck, right? So Islam doesn't care about class. There's a hadith by the Prophet Muhammad about that people are like on two decks, right? Those on the top, those on the bottom. The people on the top, they get water from the side and they give it to those on the bottom. But if those on the bottom say, let's drill a hole for our part of the ship to get water directly, be self-sufficient, not have to rely on those on top, and let's not trouble those on top by serving us. If those on the top let them do it, they would all sink, okay? A Marxist wouldn't accept that analogy by the Prophet Muhammad that you can have two decks, Not by race, but simply that humans have hierarchies, right? They form hierarchies. It shouldn't be by race, by the way. It shouldn't be by ethnicity. It shouldn't be by madhab, of course, as Muslims, because it should be by merit. But the obsession, the Marxists will still hold on to the issue of wealth and say Islam allows a ruling elite of wealthy people against poor people. They'll have that accusation against Islam. And oh yes, they also say that Islam is patriarchal because the verse of the Quran talks about Muslims are, males are qawwamuna over the females. And of course, qawwamuna, I know that feminists try to use mental gymnastics. Oh, the word means something else. If you squint a bit, you turn it upside down, and you look at it, and you take some pills, which are psychedelics, you can read it a different way. But it comes from the same roots in Arabic as mustaqim, to be straight or straight. Yeah, or qaim, lead, or stand over, right? All these synonyms of that are pretty straightforward as what they mean, okay? Islam is patriarchal. So, as in terms of the family unit, the guardian is the male. The feminists, you can't twist it, but they try to. It doesn't mean that they don't try to. So anyway, here's my advice, and I'll leave it on this, basically. First and foremost, brothers and sisters, but now mostly brothers. I've already mentioned this earlier on, but I said it before. If you encounter sisters that demand their rights in Islam, from Quran and Sunnah, don't call them feminists. Okay? You want to encourage Muslims to have recourse to Quran and Sunnah. You want to encourage that. Any Muslim that comes to you demanding rights from Quran and Sunnah, you welcome them and you give them those rights. Right? Or you facilitate those rights, or you stop standing in the way of those rights, whichever issue is the case. Okay? Very important, you're scoring an own goal against the Deen of Islam by being an obstacle to those wanting to practice Deen of Islam. And I'll give you an example. There was a public speaker who said that he was defending the Taliban, and he was on the issue of them banning women's higher education. Right? Just the issue of banning women's higher education. So I messaged him and I said, look, you need to, that's incorrect what you're doing. He said, well, it's not obligatory for women to have higher education. It's not obligatory in Islam. Right? You claim to follow Quran and Sunnah. Show me Quran and Sunnah which says that women need to have, or obligatory to have a higher education, because there was no higher education back in the time of the Prophet Muhammad, yeah? There wasn't, right? So you show me evidence. And I say, okay, well, I can't show you evidence that it's obligatory. But for the same reason, I can't show you evidence that it's obligatory that men should have higher education either, right? But here's the thing. Yes, it's not obligatory, but it's also not haram for women to have higher education. So the Taliban can't make haram what is halal, right? They can't say that women can't have higher education, right? They can say they're not going to fund it, right? But they can't say it's banned, yeah? Although, strange enough, there are madrasas in Pakistan of those following the same ideology of Taliban, but they have women's education and teach them in Islamic schools and universities, right? But what's really happening then, right? Well, the Taliban basically, if you look at what happened, 1 month after their international funds were frozen, they were very upset by this. They said, give us funds, we're starving, right? We're starving, there's many Afghans who are starving. Give us those funds, and America's like, oh no, we have to have a lawsuit about 9/11 against you because we, excuse to keep your money, basically. And so the Taliban, in essence, I think what the Taliban did was like, well, okay, well, what leverage do we have on the West? Okay, they're obsessed with women's education. All right, let's just press that button then. Okay, you want women's education? Well, basically, until you unfreeze our money, we're going to ban women from higher education then, right? Give us the money, right? Now, I think the Taliban should have been more open about this, said it quite openly. Simply said, not going to ban it, they're going to defund it. And that money they're taking out of it, they're going to go to Afghans who are starving. Because there's no point being educated when you're dead. All right? They should have been clever about it. And as I've said before in the previous lectures, if Taliban are looking for a PR consultant, I'm available Mondays to Fridays okay. All right, but here's the thing, right? Just because the Taliban ostensibly talk about Sharia doesn't mean that we have to defend them no matter what they do. Yeah, Quran and Sunnah is our objective guide here. If they go against it, then we have to call them out. Yeah, we have to call them out. I don't care if they generally call to Quran and Sunnah. They have to follow it too. Okay, so they could have said that. Right? And of course, there'll be many education madrasas that are teaching women for free in Afghanistan. They wouldn't be affected by the Taliban defunding it, basically. But if they were going to press the button on the issue, they should have at least been honest about that, basically. Yeah. Okay. Last advice: follow the commands and the definitions of those commands from the Quran and Sunnah. Okay. Any Muslim talking about justice, rights, great, excellent. Hukuk, and ahkam, excellent. Right? Stand for justice, for being adl, great. Okay, now Karl Marx, no Karl Marx, stick to the Quran and Sunnah. What does the Quran and Sunnah say? I don't care about Karl Marx and all this stuff. I don't care about your neo-Marxist theories, your oppressive classes. I don't care about all this stuff. What does the Quran and Sunnah say? I want to know. And I'm going to finish off in the words of a great intellectual scholar. I'm embarrassing him by saying this because he's very humble. But Sheikh Jafar himself, at the lecture he gave at the event, The Elephant in the Masjid in 2020, here's what he said to Muslims: you're trying to unite the ummah. This is one ummah. We worship one God. It cannot be two ummahs, and we have contributed to that, i.e. dividing into separate ummahs. We have to stop contributing to it, so otherwise we're ruining our own houses with our own hands. Stop dividing Muslims, especially stop dividing Muslims based on non-Islamic Kufr ideologies with un-Islamic epistemologies that demand racial and gender and soon sexual orientation-based class divisions and social conflicts. So barakallahu feekum for your patience. I look forward to your questions and contentions.
Okay, so everyone please settle down. This is just for the quick fire round. The contention round. If I've said anything you disagree with or that you find objectionable in tone or in content, please feel free to raise it and discuss it, and I'll also let you go back to my response. So we have one sister that's raised her hand up. Go ahead, sister.
It's kind of I object in everything that happened so far. Just kidding. I really appreciate everything. I think, okay, I'm not involved at all with Syrian. It's my first time hearing what is happening. Even MSA, I didn't know that was like this kind of, let's say, group or people that are trying to have the UBC Muslim community. And being as an outsider, I'm kind of surprised that if you are saying you're Abdul Haq, who's Abdul are these people? Must be somebody behind them, or if there is no somebody behind them, of course these people must be desperately needing mental health advice, because how come these people can make such a mess and bring you from UK and bring, like, we are very busy people, like, come and dealing with some people that have some problems in so many fields, that's why I'm kind of very concerned who is behind this.
Okay, barakallahu feekum, sister, for your question. I'll just advise that because we live in a time of ignorance, Muslims are very ignorant about Islam. They're very confused, and many of them obviously, especially the younger they are, the more they're confused they are. We must give husn al-dhan, even though the classical scholars heard what these people are saying. The ideas that they follow, of course they would feel them, but that's assuming the classical Islamic context, where most everyone would know what Islam says about these matters, right? So instead we'll say that maybe they don't know any better, maybe they are sincere, but they've been taught by these ideologies to misinterpret things, to view racism and sexism everywhere, even in the most benign, most sincere actions you could do to counteract Jahiliyyah, they will see it as evil by you to reinforce it. So we have to rescue these people from the ideologies that have taken over their minds, they've adopted, but we must educate Muslims generally about these ideas, but also encourage Muslim youth and also educate them as to how Islam can change the world. I don't talk about getting everyone to pray or everyone to believe in one God. Right? Many people already believe in one God. That's not sufficient. It's to live by His commands. It's to implement His guidance to solve human problems. not just on how many rakats you pray for Fajr or something. We're talking about also societal problems and issues, judged by what Allah has revealed. So if you don't give the youth an alternative vision of the world they can strive, they will follow other people's visions, right? And those visions are blind, right? So I would say don't laugh at them and don't say they have mental health problems. Please don't insult them, even if they've insulted us, all of us, well, all of us, but like MSA, myself, and so on. Don't go to that level. We must be better, we must be a better example. And inshaAllah, may Allah guide them and may Allah guide us to the truth. Any other questions, contentions? Sister on the side there.
I want to say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said Iqra, the first thing. So how
Sorry, speak in the mic.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said Iqra, so how come they said no education for girls?
So how can they?
No education for girls? In Afghanistan or somewhere. I mean, it's just so clear. There's no need to explain it. Iqra, that's like what is going on.
Oh, you're talking about the Taliban?
Yeah.
No,
because he said something, you have to prove it. What is there to prove?
Oh no, I'm merely pointing out the Taliban said that, didn't say that girls shouldn't be educated. They said that they shouldn't have access to higher education or a certain level of secondary education. And they said it's sufficient they have this basic primary education up to a certain age because they want to leverage that against the West to unfreeze money. But we're not supporting that, no one's supporting that, because there's a public speaker that did, and I counted him for it. Because I said, don't say something that's not from the Quran and Sunnah. Okay, we're not here to defend the Taliban no matter what. I don't know why, although I want to make a point that it's not like the previous government was any better, they were far worse in many areas. Right, and supporting the occupation and the arrest of Afghans, corruption, and also summary executions of Afghans, bombing of Afghan weddings and civilian places. The previous government killed Afghans and facilitated the killing of Afghans. Why does everyone forget that? You know, one may argue that, well, so you have no problem if it's a secular government, but if it's a government that at least professes Islam, you have more of a problem with that? Then that makes me have a conspiracy theory as to where your loyalties lie. You just don't like anyone talking about Islam. If you have two bad governments, they both kill Afghans, but you prefer the secular one, than the one that at least tries to say, okay, we want Islam, even though they sometimes don't follow it or what have you, then that means that you prefer secular oppression to Islamic oppression, means you prefer secularism. That's all things being equal, you prefer secularism. So that's what would be my point on that. That no one's defending Taliban's actions. We speak out against what they did. Or they should at least be clear about what they say. Defund it if you want, give the money to the poor who need to eat. That would make sense. But they argued maybe there was Western education in the universities, and of course, again, I made the counter argument. Then take men out of universities too, right? If you're going to be consistent. So I criticize the Taliban for what they did. But there's no justification to do takfir on the Taliban. Okay. And then, sister right at the left there.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
My question is that we know that Islam is half in its truth, and most of us are being taught in Western universities. Which is like basically all secular knowledge, and we rarely learn about our own Islamic education. So how do we, who are like with very minimum knowledge about Islam, tell people that yes, Islam is true and Islam says the right thing? Like you are a scholar, that's why you spend the whole week explaining things and bringing more evidence and arguments from multiple perspectives. But how can we, as simple humans who are only being taught in universities a secular knowledge, how can we convince people that Islam is true?
Okay, so Sister says, how can we convince people that Islam is true? Since I think you're implying that basically you don't have, you haven't studied or there's no resource to teach you how to engage and refute Western political, ethical theories, political theories, how to show Islam is superior in those discussions on how society can be ruled and guided. Is that the correct characterization of what you, okay. First correction is, I'm nowhere near an Islamic scholar. I would agree with the BMC's friends' public comments about myself. I am not an Islamic scholar, and I don't purport to be, never have. Okay, I like wearing turbans just beards, but come on, that looks nice, it's cool. Right? You don't have to be a scholar to wear turbans. It was standard fashion a few hundred years ago, yeah? For the average guy. So anyway, make turbans great again. That's what all right. Okay, I mean, let's just say that I'm learned in critical political philosophy and political theory. I studied political theory and political fiqh for decades, and also I studied Western theory and political fiqh for decades. So I have some learning in those things. However, if anyone wants to call me ignorant and say you don't, please then come and debate me and show me my ignorance. Yeah? Right? It's easy. It's okay to say it after this event is over. Last year I came, I spoke to people about feminism and critical race theory, and they said, oh, I didn't know anything about it. Didn't convince me. I asked people for contentions. No one spoke. Right? I wasn't scared. I don't think I'm scary, I hope. My British accent isn't that scary. Right? So, some say it might be right. Well, like, I asked, show me where am I wrong? You can factually refute me, if you like. If I said something incorrect, you can factually refute me and say, I've said something incorrect. I'm awaiting pigs refutations and refutational videos sent against me, say, Abdullah doesn't know Marxism, doesn't know this and this. Bring it, please. Don't just say, I don't know what I'm talking about. Okay, great. Show me then why I don't know what I'm talking about. And they say, oh, I don't have the time. They'll make tons of excuses, of course. Anyway, but I debate academics, and they seem to make time for me to debate on these topics. Anyway. So, I would say this. There are a number of training providers out there, holistic Islamic training providers that teach free courses, which are holistic in Canada. So we have the I3 Institute. They teach the YD program, the Young Dawah program, the IE program, which will give you A to Z about the deen, and they don't charge for it, in essence. So why don't your universities benefit from that? Because I'm an instructor on those things, in those courses, and you can benefit from that for free, in essence, because you're on student budgets, basically, right? And of course, these videos will be made public, and I've done courses for different institutes on Western political theory and so on and so forth. I'm currently doing a course for Al-Bala Academy on Western civilization, all the way from the ancient Greeks till today. So there are a lot of courses out there you can benefit from. Of course, that one's paid, but obviously the Young Dawah probably isn't. So there are a lot of courses you can benefit from, but I would primarily tell you to read. There are many classical works about economics, about how Islam deals with political problems. There are obviously more recent books, though, by people that would be, I suppose, they are modern-day scholars, but they've made some very interesting contributions. And it's across the madhab, like Muslims agree on our political positions and our ideas. We agree more than we disagree. Okay? The only difference between I teach Western political philosophy to Muslims. The only difference between me and, let's say, some student organizations is I teach it as an academic idea. Like, here's what they believe. You teach ancient Egyptian religion or Egyptology. You say, here's what they believe. The difference between me and them is they teach it as, here's what you should believe. Here's what is the truth. There's the difference. I only wish Muslims were more skeptical on these issues when they study it. So I'll simply say, read as many books as you can find there are many Muslim academics and scholars today that make very great stuff. On classical Islamic understandings of politics or economics, all the way from Imam Mawardi, if you like, to what Imam Ghazali also was done in Ibn Taymiyyah, and many others, Imam Haramain al-Juwayni and many others. Or you could read modern-day guys like Taqiyuddin al-Nabhani, who's written, and of course, you don't have to be, if you're Shia and you say, I don't want to read Sunni books, say, okay, you can then read Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr, who wrote a book called Falsafatuna, Our Philosophy, In it, he refutes Marxism, actually. So if you want a great refutation of Marxism, you can read his book if you like. You know? So, and there's tons of resources out there. Just go and read, basically, as much as you can. And attend these courses, the Young Da'i program by I3. It's free, basically. So avail yourself of that. Okay, that was more of a question on contention. Sister Deb has a point, please go ahead.
Jazakallah khair. If my voice is breaking a little bit, it's because I'm nervous. Jazakallah khair for coming over and teaching us. I came across during my studies capitalism and Marxism and feminism, and there's always that push on picking a side, on having an ideology. Alhamdulillah, I've never said, I've never taken it in. I've always been careful about it and see what does Allah says in the Quran and what the Prophet say. So it's been a little bit difficult, so I really appreciate you and other mashayikh when they speak about it from not a traditionalist perspective, but in a way of like we understand what's going on and whatnot. So one time in our class we had a guest speaker who worked with the UN in Women in Development projects. And the guest speaker was very proud of all the work that they did in Mali, helping Muslim women and to have reference and oppressed women in a patriarchal society and how they opened school and did all these great things and helped them have a businesses and stuff. And the question I asked her was, well, there is young boys and men in that society. You guys have a similar programs for them. And she didn't give me a clear answer. It's like, oh, we have this, we have that, but it wasn't as solid as what she was doing. Like she had a whole list of all the things that she did for women, and then at the end, asked her a question like, in the next few decades, do you think you're going to have a Malian society where maybe you think women are oppressed now, but it's going to be on the other end where maybe young heterosexual men are going to be the oppressed one, and at that time, what are you guys going to do? And again, she didn't give me really an answer, but if you can, Sheikh, maybe tell me, what can we do as a Muslim Ummah where we don't end up in that position where we're just going to be trying to balance things out without having a concrete solution, if I made sense.
Barakallahu feekum, sister. As I said, don't call me Sheikh, you can call me brother. Right, that's more apt. Frantz Fanon, who is loved by post-colonial studies, which again implies some new Marxist frameworks to post-colonialism. But Frantz Fanon, he mentioned something interesting, just an observation about European Germany, because I said the neo-Marxist framework doesn't really teach you anything, but they just point out the only benefit contained in their books is things that you can see for yourself anywhere without, you don't need to be neo-Marxist for it. For example, that the colonialists want to impose their ideology on the colonized countries. Yeah, we knew that. Okay, thanks for saying the same thing that we all could see. Frantz Fanon said that the colonialists, they found it difficult to change the minds and ideologies of the men in the society, the colonized society, because men are entrenched in their economic system, they're entrenched in their ways, and they might be more resistant to change. So they found it easier to target the women. And they don't just mean, we'll give women education, we'll teach them mathematics and engineering and physics and medicine. They mean also, in those institutions, teaching them Western ethics and values and morals and so on and so forth. That's what they use those institutions for. It's almost like the teaching of maths and language and physics is like a Trojan horse, but inside there's the morality and the ideas they're trying to teach them. They really want to teach them inside there. We need to have educational institutions for both Muslim men and women, not because we believe in equality, not because we care about that we're worried that Allah will get angry with us. We believe it because we require it because there is a benefit to the Deen of Islam in having both sides of the Ummah highly educated enough such that we can work out solutions to the problems that face us. Okay? I view that men and women as like tandem processes. I don't know if anyone does computer science or what have you, right? Two tandem processes working in tandem is actually more powerful than one big processor. And I view that women's intellectual life in historic Islamic societies and men's intellectual life have been a great dual processor. Right? There are many male scholars. There's many stories. A male scholar is giving halaqah, and a student asks him a question of fiqh, and he goes, "Wait 1 second," and he goes out of the room, right? And then he comes back later. You've heard of this, so he comes back later, and he gives the opinion, and he keeps doing this now and again. And the students say, "Sheikh, why do you keep leaving the room to get the opinion?" He says, "Well, because I'm asking my wife, because she's more knowledgeable about me in this matter, right?" Yeah. So, having highly educated sisters is a strategic interest for the interest of the Ummah itself and the Deen of Islam, having knowledgeable Muslims in the material sciences. We don't need the Western ethical stuff, that can just be thrown in the bin. We need to update our knowledge in physical sciences, medicine and engineering, astronomy. So, I wish we approached it like the Europeans did when they encountered Muslim civilization. They saw the Islamic books. They saw, I forget the Islamic books. Oh, Muslims and Muslim mathematics. Yeah, we'll take that. Yeah, Muslim engineering, we'll take that. They knew the difference when they were borrowing from us, right? I wish Muslims knew that difference too when learning from the West. So that's what I say, that yes, these NGO education programs for women in the Muslim world by these foreign organizations tend to be there to inculcate Western ideas, morality and values into the Muslim world. And they've been quite successful in places that have heavy penetration of Western ideology and colonialism, like Egypt. You see high levels of Western feminism amongst the women there. And then, as that rises, you see more rise of modern problems in the family unit. Now, does it mean now that the mindset of Muslim men or what have you is pristine Islamic? Because after hundreds of years of civilization degradation, of course, colonialism affected them too. They don't represent the best Islamic mindsets, or even Islamic mindsets generally, let's be honest. Okay, Jahili is everywhere, right? Not just in women, everywhere. Okay? The issue is, let's be honest about it. The Quran says men and women are allies. Let's, as Muslims, allies, fight with the Quran and Sunnah, strive with the Quran and Sunnah, against it as allies, and we need strong allies. Women need strong male allies, men need strong female allies in the deen, right? And in the knowledge of al-waqi of the world. So that's why I don't care about equality. That's not Islamic principle or interest, but we care about what benefits the Ummah in fulfilling its objective as being shuhadat al-nas, witnesses to mankind. So we need strong education in the deen for men and women, and also education in the material sciences for men and women. Then our civilization will hopefully revive, inshaAllah. Just 1 second. One other wanted to ask a question. I'll just take one from this side and I'll go right back to the other side. Yeah, you go ahead, bro.
Thank you, Ustaz, for the speech. So actually, I'm not part of like the UBC community. I'm actually on like exchange. So my question is more to like part of the ending quote you shared, like previously paraphrased, was on how we shouldn't be further dividing the Ummah. And back in like my Singaporean university in NUS, like there are various divisions within the Islamic clubs, primarily to cater to different needs and wants. And for example, we also have a club like specifically for females. So my question is, what is your advice on how such Islamic clubs within the university with already existing separations to cultivate an environment in which these separations would actually be sustainable and healthy?
Okay, so how do you deal with clubs that already split clubs, basically? I just want to make a point there because you remind me of something. There's all this talk about the lack of representation of black Muslims at the MSA. Okay, there wasn't that many black Muslims in the MSA. Why is there not more representation? And it was noticed that, wait a second, where are all the Malaysians? Alright? Then could we say now the MSA has structural racism against Malaysians? Because there are Malaysians that come to the MSA, to the UBC, but somehow there's none at all, ever, in any of the MSA, apart if you correct me if I'm wrong, we're on Malaysians, right? Yeah. So there are issues there, I think, with people sometimes making clubs that are culturally, that share a particular cultural perspective that looks at the top of the Islamic side of things. But I think that with any MSA, as long as you have sisters having events with sisters, their own sister-led events for sisters, sister halakas, which I think the MSA does, the MSA does have it, and so on, that sisters feel that they can have a intellectual life, a social life at university, obviously without having to mix with men. And that was also one of the things that the BMC did. They wanted to ask for some events to have gender mixing in it, right? Anyway, so I can't give you an easy answer to that, but simply to say that there should be no problem to coexist within one organization. I think this brother in the front had a question, please. Just give it, then I'll put it right back to the sisters again. Sorry, I'll back it back. Go ahead.
Assalamu
alaikum.
So, leading up to this event, there was a lot of discontention with you and a particular tweet you made. And in the tweet you stated that Marxism is worse than Zionism. And a lot of people have been using that to dismiss anything you have to say. So what would your response be to that?
Okay, so actually it was after encountering a lot of Marxist Muslims online on Twitter. They came out of the woodwork. They once that I made some anti-Marxist comments about Muslims following Marxism. They decided to swarm me on Twitter, and so I felt like, in order to just calm things down and make everything more relaxed, I would just say that Marxism was Zionism. But there's a reason. I would say that, right? So for the Marxists, they think Marxism is justice. So they think that how Zionism isn't. So why that would be like an affront and insult and ridiculous. But let's be honest here. I don't see how many Muslims do you meet that say, "I believe in Zionism"? Do you know anyone? Anyone? Any Muslims that say, "I believe in Zionism"? Anyone's met one? Okay. Well, how many Muslims have you met that say they believe in Marxism? Yeah. Well, you know to put your hand up because we're talking about them right today. Yeah. So Marxism is more prevalent amongst Muslims than Zionism. Because Zionism would naturally, Muslims would be repelled from the idea of their fellow brothers and sisters being persecuted. They would never adopt Zionism generally, but they would be attracted to Marxism. And if Marxism teaches kufr, demonstrably kufr concepts, then it is more dangerous to the Muslim Ummah than Zionism is. Because Zionism might kill you, but Marxists will take you outside the fold of Islam. Yeah? So your hereafter is more at stake with Marxism. That's why I said that. But those who try to say, oh yeah, I think they try to argue he's justifying Zionism. I've debated Zionists on public debate. I had a 5-hour debate with Zionists, basically. I've done a course on Palestinian advocacy using some cutting-edge arguments, ones that I discovered back from my own research, which I've never heard anywhere else. With new refutations against Zionism, stuff that Zionists can't dodge, because they're good at dodging stuff. Yeah. Recently, I went on a TV channel saying that Israel is a state based on racist laws, and they shut down they had to quickly shut it down. So I've earned, I dare say, I've earned a few medals in the pro justice and pro Muslim advocacy that I have against the injustice of Zionism. So they can't say, knowing my record, that I'm pro-Zionist. I'm just anti-Marxist, right? And let's also not forget that Jews in the 19th century, late 19th century in America and in England, the strong majority of them were Marxists and Zionists at the same time. Ben Gurion was a socialist. He set up the first socialist party. He set up the first state, of course. And the first political Zionists who were successful at establishing Israel were socialists. Many of them Marxist socialists. Okay? Because just like Muslims today, our predecessors, whom one might argue confirm the prophecy of the Prophet Muhammad, which said that if there was a Jew or Christian who did something bad, we will do the same thing. Just as our predecessors, our cousins, our Semitic cousins, many Jews succumbed to socialism and Marxism because they were disillusioned with the West. So many Muslims have done too. You're following them. So if you're Marxist, you're following the same ideology almost as Ben Gurion, one of the leading founders of the Zionist state. You know, and I'm completely anti-Zionist, right? You know, so I've been refuting them. I've called them racist many times, and I'll continue calling them racist. Made them angry quite a few times on TV, my public debate with them. And I've been campaigning for actually a decade, at least 2 decades, on the issue of the unjust occupation of Palestine. So yeah, that's a ridiculous thing to say that I'm somehow pro-Zionist because I say Marxism is worse. No, I say, just because I say one is the devil doesn't mean I'm not saying the other one is Iblis. You know, I'm saying like they're both bad. I'm simply saying that one is worse, a worse devil than the other devil, to use that metaphor analogy. Okay, that's what I said. Yes, say it again. Yeah, it's like, no, I don't see no Muslims believing in Zionism. I see Muslims believing in Marxism. So yeah, Marxism is the worst threat to Muslim Iman. Yeah. Anyway, so back on this side now. Sorry. Go ahead, sister.
So, sister wants to stay anonymous, so I'll just read her questions.
Sure.
I think there are 3, but I think they're related, so I'll ask them all at once.
Sure.
So during the process of the creation of this report, what were the intentions surrounding how the community was meant to react to reading the report? Did the creators of the report believe that no form of isolation behavior, ridiculing, and shaming would happen? If the goal is to also educate them and bring them back, do you believe this sort of impact on the community would be forgotten and that they would warmly be invited back? And then the second question, wouldn't it have been sufficient to just post the evidence while maintaining anonymity? Wouldn't the goal have been reached even if names were left out? As well, what counts as public figure again? Would the president of the MSA not count as public figure? And then the last one is, how would you respond to claims surrounding the potential danger and threat that the report has on the sisters' current lives and their future?
Okay, it's quite a few ones. What was the intention behind the report? Well, firstly, the MSA was claiming it was being slandered. It was initially just a dispute, then we found that it was ideological, and then we wanted to make sure. The MSA was being said they were racist and sexist. Now, I could see by the fact that there were people jumping off the ship of the MSA, and they were just one executive away. So the MSA were basically very beleaguered, in a very weak position, and and they obviously don't care about the feelings and emotions of the MSA president because, oh, he's just a guy, he deserves to suffer anyway, right? So, and everyone, people even from Edmonton meeting him and saying, oh, I heard you were racist and sexist, basically, right? He faced that. Now, it's not my job to be, I am sympathetic to my brothers and sisters, generally speaking, but I had to be objective. I told him that if he did make a mistake, if he's messed up, then he should apologize. And I'm sure Muslims will take him back if he did do something bad. He should apologize, do tawbah. I'm pretty sure people won't hold it against him if he did do something bad. So initially, when we first started discussing this, right, I told him this, but let's see what the evidence says. And as I encountered evidence, of course, as he was telling me that MSA executives were dropping like flies, people first were coming in and telling him that they heard the MSA was racist and sexist, and they didn't want to join it, and want to stay away from it, right? There was an ongoing and incessant slander campaign, and I say slander because the accusations are verifiably false. So that qualifies as slander now, yeah? So that was going on and on and on. No one cares about the MSA. No one cares about the MSA president. Oh, he's a guy, he deserves it. He's white adjacent, he was white passing anyway, and who cares about males? And that's what it seemed. No one came to, hardly anyone came to his defense. Even those that actually were with him dithered and sometimes we're left for a bit, and then it's okay, maybe actually my mind comes months later, right? He had virtually no one, and except his two vice presidents, okay? I'd say shame on her, she was also treated in that way. And they didn't bother to check both sides. They didn't check both sides, yeah? So, if there's a choice between people thinking bad about the MSA for false reasons, or thinking bad about another group for valid reasons based on what the evidence says, we have to always pick the evidence, right? Because I would have made the MSA apologize had it been revealed that they did indeed do what they said they did. I would have made all of you apologize, yeah? So that was the intention. The intention was, firstly, to find the truth. But then when it was noticed that there was an ideological component in the matter, and it was much more extensive, it became a case study. A practical example of how left-wing ideologies actually affect the actual tactics used by people on the ground. It was fascinating, actually. And the purpose of the report then became to inoculate the whole community from falling for such tactics again. So you witness it, you observe it, and you stay away from left-wing ideologies, or rather, when you study them academically detached, rather than, well, let me adopt this. Yeah? Right? No one studies Egyptology to adopt Egypt religion, right? I wish they had the same approach to any of the other Western ideologies. Yeah? I mean, I teach them ideologies, but I don't teach them for adoption, right? So that was the intention. It was the truth. It was to resolve the dispute. It was to if someone was being unfairly slandered, then they need to be exonerated, and that's what was happening. Now you might say, okay, but why there's only 5 individuals that were publicly named of the group because they were public figures. Why were they named? Because they were public figures and public activists. They were movers and shakers of the community. They had extensive influence. And they were on TEDx and Al Jazeera. I mean, come on, right? I mentioned if Zaki and I, some of these people, if Zaki and I had made a private faux pas, but it's got leaked, they'd all be talking about him, mentioning his name. He's a public figure. He deserves to be accounted, even for his private actions in his private life. Yeah. So then, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Yeah. Because I believe in equality like that, or equality in truth, that is. So basically, these are public figures, and if they are unrepentant and they don't want to change their because they weren't embarrassed by what they said, they weren't ashamed by what they said. They're proud. They stand by it. I don't even know what they use as the expose. This is free PR, you know. So this is free PR for them. Like, we do believe Marxism is justice. Yeah, let it be known. Yeah, they would love this. Why are they ashamed of it now? Why are they ashamed of it now? Yeah, don't be ashamed. You made your bed, you lie in that bed. Yeah, if you're a public figure. We those of them who weren't public figures, who just were private individuals, what have you, until they step into the public realm, we like to give the opportunity for them to remain in a private capacity. But those who are public or local activists, who are publicly known, well, then everyone needs to know your opinions, your public opinions you're proud of. Why is that a bad thing? Sorry. Why are they ashamed? Don't be ashamed. The Prophet Muhammad said, if you have no shame, do what you want. Yes? Okay, then have no shame, isn't it? Potential danger and threat. What, for the stuff that you were saying publicly? Already. So, potential danger and threat, like no one's going to attack them. There are ex-Muslims amongst us, no one attacks them. Right? Like no one's going to attack them, what have you. But we are going to know what they say. Now, if they choose to repent and if they choose to retract what they've said, if they choose to reevaluate Marxism, I will be personally the first one to encourage the community to accept that retraction and accept that apology. Although they're told it's to Allah, not to us, but because they have to retract the slander, they have to apologize to those they've slandered, though. Allah doesn't forgive that. The one who slandered has to forgive. So if they choose to forgive that, then of course, I would be strongly encouraging everyone to forgive them who were slandered by them, and everyone to accept their retraction of their ideas. and to consider them to. I'll be the first person, I'll be your first champion to do so. But if you don't retract, if you want to retract because you want to stand by it because you believe in it, then I say it with your chest. Yeah, own it. Then don't be ashamed if you think there's nothing to be ashamed of. So that would be my response. Further.
She has 2 more questions.
Please.
So the first one, are you claiming that communication from the brother's side, not talking about MSA, technically talking about MSA associates, was completely peaceful and respectful at all times? And then a second question, isn't telling the audience to go to a sister's post where she has awra and tabarruj problematic? And would you not receive the sins for each brother who did go and look?
Okay. So do we associate? Do we account MSA associates that the MSA approved of who said comments? Well, we actually attached them to when the MSA approved of them. For example, there was a Kenyan brother who disagreed. So he's obviously black background, but of course the BMC don't represent Kenyans, or at least him anyway. They disregard his opinion. Right? Is it because they're Somali and they're oppressors of? I don't know. According to neo-Marxist opinion, that's what neo-Marxists would say. When you turn it against itself, they'll say that they could easily say, using their own framework against them, they could say that they disregarded a Nigerian sister who was the sister's VP, when she argued that the training provided should be exclusively from an Islamic lens. They ignored her, and they ignored a Kenyan brother who raised concerns about the providers of the BMC and the BMC itself. What it was doing. They ignored these individuals which have attributes that people from their home country would be criticizing, attacking, being racist against. They ignored these people. They ignored other black students. Only their opinions are truly the view of the black students. It sometimes seems to us, right? They didn't say that, but if you're saying you claim to represent black opinions, and yet you ignore the opinions of black students because you disagree with them, doesn't seem like you represent anyone except yourselves, really. And even then, according to their own theories, an oppressor group of black people now. Those who oppress black people are majority African people in Africa. So that's what I'd say. So we include, whenever the MSA associates said something that was approved by the MSA, then we would include that. If they said something that was rude, bad, or what have you. And we looked at what the BMC, who they would pick. The BMC would point to, this, we don't like this, what this person said, that person. So we looked at, does that person represent the MSA, and who's to blame? The guy who commented on Sister ST's post on the MSA Facebook, not Instagram, sorry, MSA Facebook. He wasn't commenting on her personal Facebook, okay? As to pointing, we didn't include a copy of that picture on the post, but because the post is still up online, and because people might argue, what do you mean she had a problematic post that was tabarruj? What do you mean by this? Give me evidence. Then, out of darura, we had to leave the link, and the link is simply just to the online picture that's on the MSA Facebook site already, right? It's still up on there, right? So that was the only issue. Do we get sins of people going to it? Well, we mentioned that the hole is exposed, so brothers shouldn't be clicking on it. But sisters, feel free to click on it to verify the problematic nature from an Islamic lens and perspective. So that would be the response. It's not on her personal profile, it's on the MSA's profile. There was another case where Sister D.I., I only know those acronyms basically, or her initials basically. So Sister D.I., so she had an Instagram profile that was public. We know because the snapshot of it showed that the follow option button was unpressed. So they weren't following it, it was public, where she had links to a type of links page that had LGBT activism on 3 major points of it. One right in the middle of the BLM section. Right? It's not unnoticeable, it's quite in the middle, it's right in there. You even click on the BLM section buttons. It's got a page with more LGBT stuff, even more blatantly, including activism in Kuwait to change Kuwait laws to stop outlawing, I think it is sexual orientation changing things, or so I forgot what it was. It was against anti-LGBT laws in Kuwait. It was linking most people, in essence, to activism against anti-LGBT laws in Kuwait, in the Muslim world, basically, laws in the Muslim world, as well as LGBT Act concerns elsewhere. So that was the kind of stuff that was linked in that. They claimed that we doxed the sister. This is a public Instagram profile that the MSA shared. I was not on the scene at that time, at any rate. That was a public Instagram profile that she shared, and even on that picture that was shared, on the report, the face was basically blocked out. Yeah? Yeah? Oh, you want to grab the mic, okay? Your personal mic or something. Okay, just pick one. Eeny, meeny, miny, moe. I'll let you untangle that mess. I've had enough messes to untangle. Okay? Alright, I need a break. Okay, hope that was the point basically. We did it as respectfully as possible. That sister's name wasn't put out there. Merely to show that she had a link on her profile, which was public. And again, I don't understand why they're ashamed of this. Yeah, they even defended it at one point, right? And when she was asked, did you share links to LGBT activism? It was recorded in the meeting minutes. She said, I don't deny it. But show me where I did it, right? Why would you say that? Why would you say, no, I didn't do it? I didn't do it at all. It's a bit weird to say, I'm not denying it, but could you show me what particular thing you're referring to? It's like, it's a bit odd, right? And anyway, and the reason why we couldn't just go with one piece of evidence, we had to get loads of other supporting evidences, as in multiple instances, is because if we just found one thing, they would have said, that's only one thing, it doesn't mean anything. It's just an accident or just my finger slipped on the button of the mouse and they just put that post up or whatever. Okay, fine. But when you see multiple instances, when you see, for example, one who was promoting an argument, arguing that consensual same-sex relationships, basically, physical intimacy is halal in essence. When she gets made the BMC kind of like, was it a book club lead, or one that teaches, does halakas in the BMC or classes or what have you, it raises issues. Right? It raises concerns when the providers they recommend talk about LGBT activism. Right? We found there was one Instagram story that seemed to attack Muslims who were critical of LGBT, and it was alleged it belonged to one of those people, but we had no evidence to show who it was, so we didn't include it in the report. We only kept what was concrete linked. We kept a lot out, because I'm very pedantic when it comes to evidentiary requirements. They're very high. Basically, you know why? Because in my line of like, well, as a Muslim, I have to follow the haqq. I can't engage in suspicion. I can't engage in dhan. Okay? I will say this thing suggests something, but it could be wrong. But in my line of work as a debater, if you make claims you don't have evidence to, you will get destroyed. Yeah? And my reputation is based on whether I get things right or not. So I'm extra motivated. To making sure that I'm very precise and other researchers were precise. And of course, my fellow colleagues in the Muslim Debate Initiative, Zara Faris, but not just her, all of them. Salah Anwar, he's coming in a couple of weeks too, as well. He's also Muslim Debate Initiative. Salah Anwar, Zakir Hussain is based in the UK, Ijaz Ahmed is based in Toronto. We all have a common ethos of the Muslim Debate Initiative, very high evidentiary requirements. We must be concrete and solid about something before we can make any claims. So we brought that into the report basically. Okay, all right. Just for a second, I'm going to give some gender privilege to the sisters. One more question from the sisters, then I'll get back to you. Please go ahead, sister. Yeah. Wa alaikum salam.
So first of all, it's very shocking to know that these kind of things are going on in today. It's kind of scary, kind of worried about the future generations and stuff. And I noticed it's a common concern, people said, what can we do to be educated, what can the Ummah do, etc. So I would like to know if the MSA is planning to do more lectures or events such as this in the future, and as you said, we need to plan for the future. If there's no plan, then we plan to fail. So specifically like this type of education or awareness, where comparing Western ideology ideologies, where it came from, and what Islam says. I think it would benefit a lot of people who find history or politics extremely boring or whatever. I feel like there's a demand or a gap for this type of education, there are different types of learners, I feel like it'd be good to constantly have something like this, especially in like schools and stuff, where kids go to. Okay.
Okay, Barakallahu feekum, sister. Are there going to be more educational programs done? Where do we start? I'm going to say this. You can make this TikTokable if you like. The reason why this event is going to be a grand finale, is going to be hopefully change things, is before this report came out, even just last week, Muslims were still cowed by these individuals, these left-wing individuals and thinkers. They were scared of them. They didn't want to even speak out against them or raise their voice at all, because they felt like they'd be labeled with no response to them. But not just them in particular. There are more left-wing Muslims coming. They're going to get more and more in number. And as they increase number, they'll become more intolerant, because this is what the game is. Khalid Abu Fadl talked about that. He himself said that he called Muslims that are not liberal, in essence, Puritans, and he alluded to a war between Puritans, a mutually exclusive, zero-sum game, almost, war between Muslims. He kind of insinuated it in his book, The Great Theft. The Great Theft, because Islam is being stolen by the Puritans, basically. Because apparently the Prophet was liberal all along, and we've stolen it. We're following 1400 years of the ijma taken right from the Sahabas and from the Prophet himself. This was just a lie, and it was a big theft. Okay? That's what's coming. Right? And they're coming in more numbers. This is just the beginning. This is just the vanguard. And they'd love to be called that, by the way. They enjoy that. It's Marxist term. So, as Muslims, this is the fight back. This is where we plant our feet and we say that we are on to what they're saying. We have superior argumentation. We are going to learn about this, and we're going to come back and educate Muslims as to what Islam truly says. And we're going to expose the kufr and the lies behind these false Western ideologies and systems. They can no longer hide behind Muslim ignorance. These events are the beginning of this. Inshallah, this is a turning point in North America. Okay, or at least in Canada anyway. It is a turning point for Muslims saying that we're not going to take this, and we're not going to be cowards anymore. And we're not going to be silent anymore. And we're going to defend our deen. We're not going to defend it, we're going to renew our efforts to propagate it. Right? We're not going to play defensive, we're going to play, intellectually speaking, offensive. Right? Without offending. Right? Yeah? Being peaceful, being humble, being using wisdom, hikmah, fair speech, but intellectually, we are the ones who should be on the upper hand. The Muslims, whether you're male, female, white, black, the Muslims are one ummah. And those who follow Kufr ideas, wherever they are, whatever opinions, as the Quran says, Al-Kufr millat wahida. It is one religion. Okay? So basically, brothers and sisters, this is the turning point. I gave my time to help make this sea change, hopefully. Okay? Now you guys know, I noticed since last week, not so scared anymore to speak out. Not shaking your boots anymore. Right? Not worried now. Now the tide has turned. Of course they're going to attack me as an individual, because that's the best they can do, and then let them. It's sad. I feel sorry for them. I feel sorry for them. I don't hate them. If they were to tomorrow apologize, I'll be the first person to say everyone accept it. Yeah? Because as Muslims, we should exemplify mercy too, as well as justice. We're not here to condemn her. And at the same time, I want to make it extra clear, do not let this prejudice, anti-Jahiliyyah initiatives that Muslims should be doing, which is, for example, I heard one guy say today, it was a guy who was criticizing me for publicizing the report, what I call a conservative Muslim. Conservative Muslims only seem to speak out against Muslims defending Islam, it seems, causing fitna. But they say nothing to those who are actually corrupting it. Yeah, they are the guardians of these people. Ironically, even though they have what these people call sexist opinions. Oh, don't criticize women. Oh, what if your wife, your sister, that was it, your sister. What would you do if your sister was criticized? You wouldn't like that. What would you do? You should be gentle with women. Oh, poor weak women in the intellect, they can't handle criticism. I wish they said that to these neo-Marxists, they'd love it. Oh, but they wouldn't care because it benefits them, right? It might benefit them, they like these people. This guy said that Muslim women shouldn't even be MSA presidents because there's a hadith about leadership, even though the fiqh says, this is incorrect, the fiqh says that only the caliph position and the wala, the governor's positions, these are political positions. The MSA position is a leadership position, you know? But he had this misunderstanding. You do not let these incidents prevent you from correcting brothers like this, right? On what Islam says, we have to be correct about what Islam says. Yes, the caliph can only be a male. This is unknown in Islamic fiqh, and the wala, the governors. Yeah, anyone can do actual political power in a caliphate system, of course. That's what Islam says. It doesn't talk about leading a company or leading. You're just a club, basically, right? And these were the guys defending these individuals. At least saying, don't publish the report, brother. You should educate brothers like this. You should educate Muslims on asabiyya and kibr. Continue that. You know, what Sheikh Efar was saying, that yes, Muslims have kibr and asabiyya against each other, yeah, but because black Muslims visually look more different than, let's say, an Arab, the distance of an Arab to a Turk or to a Persian, then there's more hate, there's more dislike, or there's more kibr against the black Muslim. That's a valid point he made. And when the MSA wanted to change that, that was good. Yeah? Don't let these people corrupt actual good programs that you wanted to do. And don't let them make you think that every sister that comes to you that says she wants rights, Islamic rights, make you think that they're feminists. Yeah? So don't let them change the good work that you're doing. Keep moving on with the deen. But the fight back against Western ideologies in Canada, at the very least, starts here, ground zero. One of the most two most liberal universities in North America, I heard. Yeah? The fight back starts now. We've planted the flag, and it's the flag for all Muslims of any gender, of any race, ethnicity, what have you. There's only one color we look at, and that is the light of the Quran and Sunnah is the only color we care about, the only gender we care about, is the only agenda we care about. So now, brothers and sisters, please use this now and educate yourself. Don't just say, well, the report's done, you've done the fight for me, I'm only one guy, go back to the UK. You have to stay here with left-wingers, right? Yeah? You need to build a robust community, go ahead and do it. Yeah, brothers and sisters, together as allies, as the Quran says, we are mutual allies, and we work together peacefully, right? So make that happen. Okay, now I'll allow a brother from that side.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair, Ustad, for the amazing lecture, the amazing Q&A. Alhamdulillah, I'm just happy that sister asked the question because I had almost the same question. I was wondering if you wanted to expand on it at any small point. The question that I had, when you have Muslims that recognize this danger but aren't particularly aware of how serious it is, they see small red flags. What would you recommend to them? And the other question I had was, when you see Muslims that recognize this danger, they see the clear contradictions, but are shy or unwilling. I know you spoke about the community's obligation, but at an individual level, how would you say that when an individual is unwilling or shy to share, to oppose these dangers, what advice or what would you say about that responsibility?
In reversal, I'll say, man up. Look, as far as I'm aware, the only thing, look, I'm a Muslim that commits sins. We all do, right? So then, I'm Muslim. Okay, well, apart from whoever might say that, but I'm Muslim that commits sin. What what redeems me? What could ever redeem me? What can I hold that can ever, inshallah, I hope to have redemption in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for, which is, I must speak the truth then. I must stand for it, regardless of consequences. Otherwise, then what use am I? What value do I have? I have no value anymore. Then I have no soul. Right? What was my point of being a believer if I can't stand for truth? Okay? So I find it hard because I've been, you could say, rocking the boat in the West for many decades and getting myself into some trouble with the powers that be. Because, as I said, if we don't speak the truth where we need to, then what are we doing on this earth then? Then what else is there for? You just want to run off the clock until you die, basically? What purpose of life is that? That's nothing. You know, even non-believers do that, so what's our point? You might as well just be a rock. Yeah? Because the rock will be formed by a volcanic process and then be destroyed at some point, and there you go, done. Yeah, what's the point then? Yeah? So, that's why I don't understand. I understand why they might be motivated to, but I don't understand why people would be scared to speak the truth, basically. I don't understand that. And it's because I don't understand that, it's hard for me to give advice on it. Let's speak the truth about the deen, that is. Speak the truth about the deen, yeah? So, as for you noticing red flags, the issue is, you can't just go up to a left-wing Muslim and say, you're on Kufr, you're doing haram, just like that. Or you're following the ideas of Karl Marx. Yeah, because so, or they'll say, oh, you're so defensive, or whatever. That doesn't convince them. And you're not giving them an alternative. Okay? In 2010 or 2011, I pioneered doing lectures on the hikmah of the Sharia. Right? How Ahkam Shari gives a superior solution to mankind's affairs. How each ahkam, each law in Islam actually is better than liberalism can prove. So, and I explained even things you think you couldn't explain. Like, why is it that that's what you call slavery, I suppose, in English translation, but Ghulami, I suppose, or whatever you want to translate that, in servitude. How is that? What's the hikmah behind Islam not abolishing that? Yeah, and why is it like in perpetuity? It hasn't been abolished. It's now it's obsolete, I suppose, but it's not. It's not. The law still exists in the books. Yeah. Why is it that okay? I think you already know about the issue of half the males get double inheritance of females because they support women. They might support their sister. Have to support their sister. But you know that already. But it's the kind of hikmah that explains how Islam not just is from the Creator, but gives superior solutions, more just solutions to the problems in the world today. That's been one of my main issues. My main lectures, I refute liberalism and capitalism and compare it to Islam. Right? If you don't teach Muslims why Islam makes more sense, all you're doing is going up to them and saying, God says something, so this is haram what you're doing, and that's it. They just think of you as a meddling chacha, meddling uncle. Yeah, everything's haram, right? They're not going to be convinced. So what you take away, you must give as an alternative. If you take the kufr you take, you must give haqq as an alternative. Right? Because you want to change the world, they want to do something. You can't say, ignore the energy. The energy's in there. Okay? That's what I would advise. That's why I say that you can't just tell your kids, don't be political, just do your prayers and wait for Mahdi and whatever, yeah? Because, they won't wait for Mahdi, they wait for Marx. Yeah? Right? So that's what I would say, right? Is what you have to do. So go and study. And not just brothers, sisters as well. Because we need sister dawah carriers as well. In the Muslim Debate Initiative, we have two sisters who are debaters. So the Tabassum Hussein and Sister Zara Faris. Right? Tabassum Hussein is a PhD neuroscientist. Right? And Sister Zara Faris, I believe, studied Islam, Arabic, and law. All right? And so, the problem that we've been having, and here's a problem, and I think sisters need to help me out with this, is, I've been pressuring sisters. I've been pressuring, you can use that little TikTok clip. I've been pressuring sisters to get more involved in dawah. more publicly vocal, and even get involved in public debate. But the sisters who are upon the deen, upon the haqq, it's very rare and very difficult to get them to agree or to be motivated. They agree, but they've been motivated to go and to do that. But meanwhile, the sisters who follow Western ideologies are really highly motivated. Yeah? And that means then that you get lopsided issues. When the Sister Tabasum was saying, Zarafat, when they came on the scene, it was a whirlwind because everyone was like, wow, we've never seen sister debaters before. You know? And yeah, and they had, they knocked head and took names, that expression in North America? They knocked some heads and took some names or something, yeah? They incurred casualties on the other side of they debate non-Muslim feminists, non-Muslim Christians, and all kinds of peoples. Atheists, Islamophobes, they debated a whole bunch of them. I wish more sisters in the deen, following the haqq, would get actively involved, because sisters need to be inspired by public speaking. Many sisters want to get involved in these things, and it seems like the only avenue for that is these left-wingers who say, no, come, we'll give you a platform. These uncles who say, no, you don't need to go onto public platform, just get your education and stay at home and make kids, and that's it. Yeah? That's unfortunate. That's unfortunate. Alhamdulillah, I think in 2 or 3 weeks' time, Aisha Laswas also is coming to UBC on the Islam Awareness thing, and that's alhamdulillah. So she's a respected academic and public speaker. Also, we hope we inspire, let's say, no, it wasn't us being the main person, she'd be the main person doing it, but we worked with to help Nora Buddha in America, United States of America, who was also an active public speaker. We helped encourage and provided resources and materials to help her in her public speaking concerning feminism as a topic. She knows how to publicly speak, it's just that feminism topic. So those are the things that we want to encourage more sisters out there, not because we want more representation or equality, we don't care about that. It's just more effective. Okay, that's all. I care about what benefits the deen and the interest of the ummah. I don't care about equality and so on and so forth. Right? If it was all being taken care of only by brothers, then fine. If it can only be taken care of only by sisters, then fine. I don't care. If it's taken care of, that's what I only care about. Yeah? So I don't care about equality or any of these Western concepts at all. I have no interest. But these sisters are highly effective, and people listen to them more because they're sisters as well. Hence, better usage than their brothers in many cases. Okay, just to go, yeah, that's science. SubhanAllah, it's 12 o'clock. Wow.
So I have a question from a sister, so either side.
You have a question from a sister?
Yeah, let's say the group.
Okay, I'll tell you what. I'll take one more from the sister side, then you, and then we'll finish, yeah? Is that okay? Any more from the sister side? Okay, just in the front.
Sorry, it's not a question, it's just a comment. First of all, I want to thank you for educating us so much. Like, from day 1 to day 5th, I'm taking so much with me. The terminology that you have been using, they were you have introduced me to those terms. And right wing, left wings, and all those things I learned. And a lot of, from this report, I've seen that a lot of questions have come to you, say, they are nervous, they're scared after this report, and they have asked you a question, like, what should we be doing, And mashallah, you have explained how we should go about it, and you have also said that we should be joining some institution for those. I just want to add one thing. All these students, I'm one of the students' mom. So as a result, I have seen that if you can add this, that after every solution you have quotations and comments, you have also added Quran, quoted Quran verses, and secondly the Hadith.
a bit. So this is because you have learned Quran so very well, and you have done the Seerah and all that thing. You are able to explain this way. So I would suggest if our children also make it a part, in their life, reading Quran thoroughly, and also reading the Seerah and the Prophet Muhammad Hadith and Sunnah. So they'll be more, they won't be that vulnerable anymore. So what do you think?
Okay, one second. Just to come closer. Okay, just make sure they don't leave. Yeah, I mean, I think what you said is pretty much what I was asked before, that Muslims need to learn, and inshallah there'll be more courses available to increase Muslim access to these things. Not many Muslims study Western political theory or social ethical theory. They're mostly interested in debating atheists or debating Christians or things like this. But atheism isn't a deen per se. These Marxism, liberalism, socialism, these are adyan, these are deens. They satisfy the classification of a deen. They are worldviews with ideas of good and bad in them. We teach you good and bad. That's a deen, basically. And Muslims aren't debating the most dangerous and biggest, powerful deeds in the world today. We're too busy debating Bible with some Christians, even though they're Christians dying in the West, and debating just lone atheists, not realizing why there's so many atheists coming up. It's because of these deeds that are materialistic, that deny God. So, inshallah, this will be the beginning of more courses and more lessons. I'm more than happy to come back to UBC. I have to try all the routine here, it's different types, so I'm more than happy to give courses. But inshallah, yeah. This is not the end. This is the beginning, guys. Yeah, you've gone down it now. So you made me interested in you guys. All right, so I feel invested in you guys now. Yeah? Yes, those two. Okay. Before you guys go, your question, and then I want to say something.
Okay, so a sister forwarded two questions on a group chat. She says, many...
Sorry, watch out for the camera.
Oh. Many of us here study the social sciences. All the madhabs of the West are even embedded in subjects like psychology. Many Muslims, as you said, fall into these madhabs of the West because it sounds so convincing and appealing. Is there any point of majoring in a social sciences degree that is so ingrained in all of this? As a woman, I ask myself multiple times, sitting in class, why am I majoring in this when Islam doesn't agree with this? It leads to feelings of alienation as well. What career options / degree options do you think are best as a young Muslim woman in the West?
Okay.
She has the same question.
What's the same question?
There are many volunteer and job opportunities here at UBC, and I really want to join, but they are affiliated with LGBTQ, etc. plus. There is gender mixing, which is unavoidable here at a secular university. Is there any point of joining a club / position that has a halal goal overall, but incorporates a bit of advocacy for halal?
Okay. I got that same question when I gave that lecture here at UBC last year. That a sister had studied social sciences, and she had learned all these ideas about sociology is linked to many of these worldviews, because Marxism isn't just a political philosophy or theory, or even an economic system. It's also a study of a lens of sociology. It's also a sociology at the same time. What I would say to that sister is, don't give up the studies of it. You're studying Kufr, and Kufr the Quran teaches us about, what does the Quran teach about Christianity, or about Judaism, or about the polytheists, or about the ancient Egyptians? Why does the Quran tell us about Kufr? So we understand it, so we can engage it. I'll say that don't give up your studies. You can be valuable, sister, in this area of study, and in the area of engaging these ideas. Right? Many brothers are ignorant. They could be benefit by the teaching, more in-depth studies about how specifically the biases are lodged into Western sociology and so on and so forth. So I'd say, you don't need to give up. You can be a value da'iyah using what you already know. The last point is what to do with university education. Well, getting a job. The same way you get a job anywhere, you have to balance up the pros and cons of how you can work and so on and so forth. But we are in a non-Muslim context, and I suppose that there is darura. Well, I suppose you must say we'll do that to work, but we're in a non-Muslim context, so whatever kind of accommodations that we try to make in this society for all the jobs, we have to do the same with the university job too. As long as they don't get you to say you must affirm these ideas, then you can't affirm them. Of course, I don't think they would, although unofficially they probably would do so, but just say that you're Muslim and you have your perspectives, but you'll do your job professionally. You know? Is that the last question?
Yeah.
Okay, then brothers and sisters, I want to draw everyone's attention. Everyone, stop what you're doing. No, stop having a chat about your favorite movies down there. All right, say what? Very quiet. Right. I want to say, brothers and sisters, that there's two people I'd like to thank, which I think their patience has been extraordinary. They didn't know all the evidences. They didn't know all the details. They were pressured for many months to buckle and bend, and all they had was this kind of whisper of a potential solution coming at some point, and they could have left any time. And no doubt they took hits on their social circles and hits against them, so to speak, for their reputation, because they stuck by someone based on a firm belief and trust, knowing Ahmed personally that he would not engage in the accusations against him, and seeing some of these firsthand. And I'd just like to thank, as real heroes, because for me, I didn't have patience with him. I was dealing with the evidence. Right? I didn't have to do anything. No one was pressuring me. No one was pressuring Zara Faris. But there were people pressuring these two individuals. And I say, if there's ever true heroes here, because Ahmed is the one aggrieved, so of course he's motivated to fight against it. But there were two that didn't have to, and there were people that ran a mile. So there are two heroes here. I want all of us to thank them. May Allah reward them for their patience, steadfastness, and adhering to the deen, the sister VP, Sister Zainab, and the brothers VP, Brother Haris.